At 6? 6. Oh, yeah, it is. Okay. Call the meeting to order. City Council of the City of El Centro. Have roll call, please.
Mayor Jackson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Cardenas.
Present.
Councilmember Villegas Walker.
Here.
Councilmember Silva.
Present.
And Councilmember Garcia.
Present.
This time we'll have a report from our interim city attorney on closed session.
Yes, thank you. On a motion by Councilmember Walker, a second by Councilman Cardenas, the City Council met in closed session today at 11:34 a.m. All council members except Councilman Garcia were present. Councilman Garcia arrived and began participating in the meeting at 11:47. There was an item that was added to the closed session agenda as the board determined that there was a need for immediate action which could not reasonably wait for the next regularly scheduled meeting. There was a motion by Councilman Silva and seconded by Councilman Cardenas to add the closed session item for anticipated litigation to the closed session agenda. That motion unanimously carried. A report was given by staff in regard to the added item, and direction was given, but no action was taken with respect to that item. And a report was also given to the item listed on the agenda with respect to anticipated litigation. And again, direction was given, but no action was taken. And finally, with respect to the personnel matter stated on the agenda, Councilperson Walker recused herself and left the meeting. There was a discussion held, direction was given, but no action was taken.
That conclude your report.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And I apologize, I actually got out of order here. If we could please stand for our pledge, and then we'll have our guest invocation by Mr. Chris Nunn from the Christ Community Church.
Ready? Begin.
All right, let's pray together. Father in heaven, we come into your presence now on behalf of these people who have entered into public service. And God, we thank you for the willingness to do that. We pray, Father, that you would bless them with an abundance of grace and humility as they go forward and make decisions that affect all of this city. Lord, we pray for divine wisdom, that you would grant them from above, Father, that they would know what to do that would honor and please you the most. And God, we pray for boldness in the face of opposition. God, that you would give them the boldness and the courage that they need to make the right decision and the right choice, no matter the consequence. Father, I pray an anointing over this meeting now. I pray, God, that you would lead them by your Holy Spirit. And Lord, we are so thankful for how you have blessed us and so much that you've been given to us. Lord, you've been so good. And Lord, we just want to praise you and thank you for all you do. Thank you for sending your son, Jesus, so that we might know what you, the Father, look like. And we just pray that you'd help us to live for him in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Nunn. Okay, at this time, we'll have presentations and announcements. Chief, we have a presentation.
Honorable Mayor, council members, good evening. I'm very pleased to be here this evening to introduce our newest police officer. He was hired 2 weeks ago, exactly. He's already an academy graduate, so he's actually on duty today, so he'll be leaving shortly after this. But our newest police officer is Christopher Jones. He comes to us from the Riverside area. Looking forward to bringing him on the team. As I said, he's already started his field training program, which, as you know, is 12 to 16 weeks long. So in a few months, we hope to have him out on his own. So Christopher Jones.
Just like to say thank you, and I hope I make you guys all proud, and hope we make a good team together.
Thank you.
Council?
Thank you.
Mr. Silva?
I met briefly Mr. Jones outside, and I welcomed him to the city. And again, I want to reiterate how pleased we are that you're with us and you're joining one of the finest departments, sort of in the valley and in other areas, and welcome to the family of the city of El Centro.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just welcome to you and your family. Do you have a family or anyone else here?
Wife, 2-year-old, and one on the way.
All right.
Wow.
Well, welcome to our community, and again, you're part of a great team, great leadership, and we just appreciate you choosing El Centro.
So welcome to you and your family, and I'd like to offer welcome wagon services if you or your wife in particular would have some time, maybe for coffee or lunch or something, and orient you to things to do and places to go and things to see while she's in the valley, especially with the children. I would appreciate that opportunity. Welcome.
Thank you. I'd like to welcome you and your family to this great city. You have a great chief, and we look forward to great work ahead of you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I'll just close by saying, welcome to Save El Centro. This is you'll find this is a great place to raise a family. So, having 2 young children, I think you'll find that this is the place that you'll call home, hopefully. And we hope that you're part of our El Centro family for years to come. So, welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Chief, do you want to continue?
All right, thank you once again. So last year, our police department was contacted through our department Facebook page by Ms. Gabriela Torres. She wanted to know if we would help her raise awareness of CHD, which is congenital heart disease or congenital heart defects. It goes by both. Awareness Week nationally is February 7th through 14th. So we scheduled a meeting. Commander Rio and I met with Ms. Torres, Leonardo Olmeda, and their daughter, Gabriela. They're all here in the audience. As a result of that meeting, learning a little bit about congenital heart defect, we posted information on our department Facebook page. Then we met with a local tailor who made us some awareness ribbons, which are red and blue. And so our employees wore those last year. We saved them, so hopefully we'll be wearing them again this year. And then in an effort to raise awareness, because as often the case is when you first hear about something, you start researching it, you realize how many children it affects. When we first posted the information, one of our employees approached me and said, "Hey, I'm really glad we're doing this. My child suffers from CHD." And you start hearing from the community that it is actually prevalent. And it does obviously affect a number of children. So in the spirit of trying to raise awareness, I had reached out to the mayor and thought maybe a proclamation would help to raise some awareness. So if I can, I'd like to bring Ms. Torres up here, and she can tell a little bit about what she's done also to help her raise awareness. And hopefully she can introduce our new friend from last year. So
Absolutely.
this is Mrs. Torres.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Gabriela Torres. This is my daughter. She'll be 3 in April. Her name is Gabriela as well. And first of all, I want to thank you guys for taking the time of having us here. Sorry, my husband, Leonardo Almeda. And thanking the chief for actually, like he said, helping us out and actually doing this for CHD, bringing out awareness to our small community. And I have some small facts about CHD. They're short. So CHD, which is congenital heart defects, are conditions that are present at birth and can affect the structure of a baby's heart and the way it works. They're the most common type of birth defects, and as medical care and treatment have advanced, infants with congenital heart defects are living longer and healthier lives. And many of them are now living into adulthood. And one of the examples is my husband. He was also born with the same defect, with a heart defect. One of every 100 babies is born with a heart defect, and about 40,000 babies in the U.S. are born every year with a heart condition. There's over 40 different CHDs, and there's little known about the cause for most of them. And there's no known prevention or cure for any of them. approximately 2 to 3 million individuals are thought to be living in the United States. And the U.S. system does not track CHD. There's poor research, there's low funding for that. And I'm really glad, again, for the PD helping us bring awareness. So I would like to start a support group in the long run and bring more awareness to our community and have some more support. And maybe we could help support one of the programs, which is the Children Heart Foundation. They help out a lot for research and families. And one thing that they do is they distribute books about, it's My Heart, and it's for parents and patients and kids to learn about the 40+ heart conditions there is. Once again, thank you guys so much for the time. Thanks for friends of the police department for helping us bring some awareness to the valley. And thank you. This is my daughter. She's had 2 heart surgeries, one at 2 weeks, one at 8 months. She will be having more. We just don't know when. But so far she's doing good. And again, thank you guys for having us here. And any questions, let us know. Oh, and I also have a Facebook page if you guys want to go ahead and follow, like. It's called Ivy Heart Family. So if you guys want to go ahead and look into it, ask any questions, tell your friends and family to contact us, that'll be great. Any questions?
Council? Mr. Silva?
Thank you for your courage, and I do know your husband because he works for IBC, and I see him periodically. And you have such a beautiful daughter with you, and I can tell by your emotions that you're very supportive, and hopefully the city can do something for you in addition to the proclamation, but you can count on us, and thank you for being great parents. It's obvious that you are.
Yeah, again, just want to welcome you. It takes a lot of courage to come here and share, these family stories, but it's very encouraging. I want to thank our police chief.
Yeah.
Just incredible community work and outreach. This is what our community is all about, and don't be shy. Come back and visit us again. We'd like to hear more about your daughter and just updates, and if there's anything our city can do to help, please let us know. But that's what our community is all about.
I do admire your courage, both of you. It's tough enough raising children, but certainly when one of them is facing a serious illness, it's very challenging, and commend you for that. I do hope that all of us can put on our calendars. We are actually having a ribbon cutting with Rady's Children's Hospital on the 25th. And El Centro Regional Medical Center has taken a lot of steps to strengthen that relationship with Children's Hospital. And I think that it's going to provide that opportunity for us to get more resources, more information, help you with building that support group. So I would encourage everyone, if you don't already have it on your calendar, it's the ribbon cutting for the Rady's Children's Hospital on February 25th at 6 p.m.
Okay, and where were that?
It'll be at the El Centro Regional Medical Center Clinic at 4th and Main Street,
The outpatient clinic.
the outpatient center. Okay?
All right, thank you.
Mr. Garcia?
I'd like to commend you just for coming out here. It's such a difficult thing when you're dealing with such a personal matter. And I'd like to personally share that my youngest son is your daughter's age, and it just hits home. I'm grateful for all the efforts that you've done to bring awareness to this situation, and that hopefully we'll do everything we can to help you.
Thank you.
And I just want to say, first off, kudos to our chief and our department for working with you last year and shedding some light last year, and then continuing on and bringing it forth to the council this year and letting us be a bigger part. And we'll be posting the proclamation on our Facebook page, our city Facebook page, which has 6,000 followers or something along those lines. So, I mean, that will start bringing some awareness, and I think, working with the city and the chief, will do whatever we can to further that. So at this time, let me read the proclamation. It's the City of El Centro proclamation for Congenital Heart Disease Week, February 7th through the 14th, 2016. Whereas congenital heart disease is the most frequently occurring birth defect and the leading cause of birth-related deaths worldwide, and whereas congenital heart disease is not diagnosed until months or years after birth, and in many cases, these undiagnosed defects can cause a sudden cardiac death, and whereas the continued research and advancements in medical technologies can save lives, as evidenced by the more than 1 million people living with congenital heart disease in the United States today, and whereas Congenital Heart Disease Awareness Week provides an opportunity for individuals whose lives have been affected by celebrating life, honoring health professionals, and sharing information with the public, and whereas the City of El Centro Mayor and Council members encourage citizens to increase awareness, education, and services for those enduring these conditions and their families, now therefore, I, Jason Jackson, Mayor of the City of El Centro, State of California, do hereby proclaim February 7th through the 14th, 2016, as Congenital Heart Disease Week in the City of El Centro. So, congratulations. I'd like to have council come down and present this to the family. Hang on the wall. Okay. Chief, thanks again for bringing that forward. I think it's certainly a great thing for the city to bring awareness to that issue. So, at this time, we will have our presentation, our monthly presentation by our chamber president, Mr. David Tyler.
Mayor Jackson, City Council, thank you for having me for your February report. With the short month of January, it's only been a couple weeks since I've been here, but the chamber has focused over the last few weeks primarily on putting on the upcoming Airshow Gala. The Airshow Gala is an event the Chamber of Commerce puts on with NAF El Centro to raise money for their air show. Now, originally, and you may feel the same way, you scratch your head to say, well, why does the Navy with a $161 billion annual budget need an organization like the El Centro Chamber of Commerce with a $300,000 annual budget to help it raise money for an air show? Well, it's interesting that the Navy doesn't give the local Navy bases really money to put on an air show. They are responsible for raising that money themselves. Sure, they pay for the fuel for the Blue Angels to fly around and all that, but all the static displays and a lot of the shows that the local base has to raise its money itself. NAF El Centro is extremely important to the economy of El Centro. It provides 1,300 jobs for our area, and it has $115 million annual economic impact on the El Centro area. There's a great report that came out about 10 years ago. Unfortunately, it hasn't been updated by the Navy, but if anybody would like to read this, if you haven't already, I can email it to you about the impact of Naval Air Facility El Centro on the area. They haven't updated it since 2006, but it still seems pretty relevant. So NFL Centro is just of great importance to the valley, and this is our way to reach out to them. We raise about $5,000 to $7,000 that we're able to give to them every year for the air show. They respond by letting us use their facilities, and it's also just a really fun event. And so it's nice to try and promote the economy, stay off any type of closure list. Once you get on those kind of lists, as you know, it's pretty difficult to get off. So that's what the chamber has been doing. And I know this, want to thank the city. The city has bought 8 tickets to the event. They get 2 with their silver President Circle level, and they've bought 6 additional. So I hope to see some of you there, and I want to thank you all for everything. Any questions?
You know, Mr. Tyler, I know that you shared at our chamber report back that the Navy base kind of relaxed its entry into the is with the air gala.
Yes.
I know for the event, and I don't know if you wanted to maybe share. I think that's pretty important when it comes to the entry of the base.
They've opened up, sometimes when you go out to NFL Central, they're very tight on the security. In fact, we're going to have to, it's interesting, as we go out there to set up for it, we have to go through a special security, okay? But for a, I think 4 or 5 hour window from like 5 o'clock until 11 o'clock the day of the event, the 13th, they have open access to the base so that we can go through and don't have to show the ID, proof of insurance, all that type of stuff as you go through. It'd be a good idea to have it with you just because you never know how that one specific officer may
Maybe
look
didn't
at
get
you.
the memo.
But it's supposed to be relaxed and make it.
I appreciate those efforts.
Sure, okay. Any other questions? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, David.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time, we'll have our consent agenda. Anybody having any items wishing to be pulled? If not, let's see a motion for items 4 and 5.
Whoa, come back here.
Motion by Silva, second by Cardenas. Please ballot. Motion passes 5-0. At this time, I'd like to ask the council for the ability to move item number 10. We have some out-of-town guests, and we have a lot of people that would like to speak. So we'd like to move item number 10 up as the first item in the new business. Is there any objections? No. Okay.
No.
Seeing none, we will do that. So item number 10 is this selection and preliminary design concept plan alternative for the El Centro Aquatic Center, and presentation by Stacy, are you doing, or Marcella?
Yes, good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. Very, very pleased to actually present to you a very important project for our community. As you know, since 2006, when we actually demolished our pool at the time, there was conversations of how do we replace that swimming pool. And so, you know, for obviously the past years, you have seen the transformation that has taken place on Adams Park. And there's been quite a milestones reached within that redevelopment of that Adams Park, obviously the sports complex and the skate park. But now we have what we obviously consider as the final piece of that redevelopment project. We have the El Centro Aquatic Center, as you know, since 2014, when we released the request for proposal to solicit and procure a design team that we could work with to design the aquatic center. We have been working with Kimley Horn, which was the design company that we ended up selecting for this process. Staff, along with obviously the task force that is working with us for the aquatic center, has been working very, very hard to work on a project that, when we first obviously were talking about it, is a $13 to $14 million project. And as you will see in this presentation, you know, staff along with the task force, and obviously looking and considering the comments from the public, is going to present to you some concepts that indicates what the public would like to see in this future aquatic center. So I'm going to turn it over to our design team so they can present to you and obviously answer any questions you may have throughout the presentation. So thank you. I'll turn it over to Matt Capuzzi with Kimley Horn.
Honorable Mayor, members of council, Thank you for having us here tonight. We're actually throwing Marcella a curveball. My name is Ross Duenas with Kimley Horn. I'm currently serving as the project engineer and deputy project manager to Matt Capuzzi of also Kimley Horn. Joining us tonight is Justin Karen from Aquatic Design Group, our design experts in the aquatic realm of the project. So I wanted to first thank you for having us work on the project, also city staff and the task force. It's been a pleasure to work with. It's our sincere gratitude that we've been able to help you in the city realize this vision that's been so long in the making, as Marcella indicated. To start off the presentation, I'd like to give you an overview of where we've been today, and then others will join the presentation of where we're going and the next steps. So a short list of milestones today. We had a kickoff this past July. We've had 2 public workshops, one in August and one in October. Between the 2, we had a design charrette with the task force to hatch out what the conceptual plans would look like. And I'll go through each of these in a little more detail as we go through the presentation. And then following the second public workshop, we did additional public outreach through the months of December and January. And here we are today in early February presenting to you. Our first workshop had 28 attendees. It was a lot of fun. It was a great event. A number of council members and other city staff attended. At the workshop, we presented a number of inspiration boards, really trying to showcase to the public types of facilities that could be in the park and get them excited for what we could do, how big were their dreams, and really try to focus in on what the community wanted and what they needed in this aquatic center that they could truly call home. At the presentation, we gave everyone that attended 3 dots, a green dot, a yellow dot, and a red dot as stickers. And they were tasked to stick those stickers onto one of the boards indicating the pieces that they most wanted. The green sticker was worth 3 points, the yellow worth 2, and the red worth 1 point. So we weighted their choices, so it was really their onus to choose wisely and what they wanted, and I think it was a great success, and everyone really participated, and I think really got a kick out of that type of atmosphere. You'll notice on the exhibits, and hopefully they're not too small, there are yellow boxes. We gave everyone also a Post-it pad, and they could write in comments and what they liked, what they didn't like, other ideas they may have had for what we could do. The board that you're seeing now is one of our competitive water boards. We really tried to showcase what the competitive pool would be. And we know from working with the task force that this is a key component and something that the city residents really want in the park. Another slide we did for competitive water tried to showcase the types of gutters that the pool could have, whether a competitive gutter shown in the bottom right that has a separation between the top deck and the pool itself, or also what's called a rim flow gutter that would edge the pool. And so there are various styles and pros and cons to each, and it really seemed that the competitive users of the park came out and really supported that competitive gutter for the competition pool. The really fun boards now, recreational water, these is where the toys and the children can really get involved in the project. There's many different options that this part of the park can take, from a splash ground with at-grade toys to dumping buckets, climb-on play structures. Item 3C on the top is a shallow activity pool with a climb-on structure, all shapes and sizes. On the bottom middle, item 3J is an activity pool in combination with a current channel, and you'll see that a little bit later in the conceptual plans, as it was something that really stuck out to the public as well. Other ideas for programming are how can we use the competitive water for recreation, because it will not be in a competitive state for its entire life. So trying to find ways to maximize how that water could be used during non-competitive events can really help with revenue recovery and keeping the entire park active, as well as a place for people to recreate. So there are floatables, there are water aerobics, water Zumba, mommy and me time, any number of ways that that water can be used, including movie night, which is in the middle there, that really garnered the interest of the public as well.
That's cool.
Yeah. And lastly were slides and other features. other recreational ideas that we thought this community might be interested in, also in collaboration with the task force. Whether the slides had 2 slides, 1 slide, a flume outlet. Again, there's a current channel that's shown, and also lazy river, which is again another component you'll see very much of later on in the presentation. But this was really these last few slides where everyone really got excited and wanted to know, what will this park mean to me? Following the meeting, we compiled the votes. These were the top vote-getting features. The competition pool in the top left, the movie night in the middle top, the competitive gutter as opposed to a rim flow gutter for the competitive pool. A shallow beach entry activity pool also scored very highly. Water slides in the middle, as well as activity with climb-on play structure in the middle right. The lazy river, also very high, and the activity combination with the current channel. And just to back up for a second, a current channel it has flow like a lazy river, but with its confined space alternative. There's no inner tubes, for example, that would be used, but you can use it to float, you can use it to swim against the current or with the current for multiple uses out of that space. Using the sticky pads that we gave everyone, here's a number of comments we received from the public. A lot of people discussed facade and styling. The old plunge came up on numerous occasions in an effort to mimic that sort of architectural feel. The seniors were very well represented at the meeting. They were very much interested in the project, and we've been striving along with the task force to make sure that we find a home for them and activities that they can really enjoy. Other items that came up were the desire to not have misters, and also that an emphasis for a snack shop or carts or vendings, primarily for party rentals, would be good to have in the park as well. Following the input from the public, which was much appreciated, we met with the task force and hosted a design charrette. And these pictures are from a different project. We did not have any good photos that came out of this charrette, unfortunately, but we really focused on cost. We have a cutout board that Mr. Campos has laid claim to. And we had cutouts of the aquatic features all to scale. We moved them around the site, tried to find the configuration that worked best based on the input we had received from the public. On each individual aquatic piece, knowing that cost is such a key aspect of this project, we had a capital cost to build the piece, as well as a rough approximation of what an operating cost may look like on a yearly basis. So we took all of that component and worked through with the task force to develop 2 conceptual plans, and we believe that we have done that. A highlight of the conversation of the design charrette is as shown. It's fairly wordy, and I apologize for that, but these were decisions that were made at the time to move forward to the conceptual plan phase. These are not necessarily set in stone by any means, but they were the direction that we moved forward with the task force in order to develop the conceptual plans. They included maximizing parking. It was a discussion to only develop the park between 6th and 5th. That was not something we ultimately moved forward with. A classroom and party room inside the building to host 50 people, so you could do rentals there as well as trainings. Food and concessions, adequate storage, no sliding doors and no natural ventilation. We did discuss, though, using skylights and solar tubes to aid in lowering electrical costs and to be sustainable. And in that party room, again, to have sink and fridge capability for ease of the usership. We also discussed a number of specific aquatic elements. We moved forward with a 6-lane competition pool over an 8-lane or 10-lane, primarily for budgetary reasons. We included a warm-up or learning pool, which would help offset the potential need to have a larger competition pool by allowing a separate pool to do warm-up and cool-down functions as opposed to using the main competition pool for those uses. We developed one concept with a current channel idea and a separate concept with the lazy river. The task force indicated that a 4-foot depth for shallow end would be desirable. We want to make sure we incorporate play structures for children and toddlers. The project did not include diving boards or water slides at this time. So as a result, we developed the two options. There are boards in the back, and they'll be in the presentation here in just a moment. Here are a few of their features and differences. The 6-lane competition pool is the same in both options. The warm-up pool is slightly different. In option 1, it's a standalone pool. In option 2, it's slightly smaller, and it also is also combined with a shallow water activity pool. In option 1, there is a multi-purpose pool for children to play in, combined with the current channel. And option 2 has a standalone mini lazy river. Option 1 is shown. The text, I apologize again, is very small. The competition pool is shown to the right of the parking lot on the western portion of the site. The building is parallel to Park Avenue along the southern frontage. The warm-up pool is shown central to the site, picnic area to its right, and the current channel combination with activity pool to the east, and then a picnic area with shade structures to the far east, and then the stormwater area at Park and Adams. Throughout both parks, there's a lot of similarities to the two conceptual plans, various shade structures, picnic areas, and community areas. The main differences really lie in orientation and the specific aquatic features themselves.
Can I ask a question
Absolutely.
about the aquatic building?
Mhm.
Does that include showers, restrooms,
Yes,
all
ma'am.
of that?
Yes, ma'am.
That will accommodate how many swimmers?
That will depend upon the final aquatic programming. There are code regulations that based on square foot of water, we need such an amount of facilities. So we'll make sure that the building not only meets code, but will provide a number of fixtures that are usable for the expected demand that the park will draw.
So it depends on how much water?
Correct.
Interesting.
Everything
Okay.
is based on how much square foot of pool we end up with.
Okay, thank you.
You're quite welcome. Here are a number of photos of the uses for the competitive water combined with the warm-up pool, as we talked briefly about, whether it's water aerobics, Zumba, or just training classes. Mommy and Me is also a potential use for that space. And here's an example of a very robust, I must say, activity pool with climb-on structure. This is conceptual plan 2. You'll notice that the competitive water is also, again, on the western portion of the site. The warm-up pool combined with the activity pool is, again, located centrally. The building is in very close proximity to the same location. And replacing the activity pool current channel is the lazy river, again with a picnic and shade area to the east and stormwater area to the far east. It's an area to detain runoff from a rain event. I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. But I guess to that point, actually, we hope to dual purpose that site, that part of the site to some degree to allow, depending on what the design becomes, picnic use in that area and not have it be just a terrible eyesore. That's not what we want. And I apologize if I conveyed that. Site 2, again, has shade, umbrellas, lounge areas scattered throughout. And again, many similarities, but subtle differences to option number 1. This is an example of a lazy river. Public workshop number 2, which we hosted to present the 2 conceptual plans to this public, was unfortunately not well attended. But the folks that were there were really excited about the 2 conceptual plans that we portrayed. And at this point, I'll hand it over to Matt to continue with where we've been and get into where we're going. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ross, and thank you all for having us here, Mr. Mayor and esteemed members of council. So after the second public workshop, we all felt as the design team and the task force that we really needed to do more outreach, only having 7 people attend that workshop. So we spent December and January doing additional outreach. City staff met with various community groups, senior groups, parent groups, Marcella could go through a list if you're interested. And then we also had a Survey Monkey online that was posted on Facebook page, city website, and various places. So that additional outreach really got us what we wanted. We got a lot of response, a lot of feedback from the public. 338 total responses from that additional outreach that we did. And you can see on your screen the overwhelming majority was really in favor of option 2, alternative 2, over alternative 1. We asked, besides the question, which do you prefer, we asked 2 other pretty open-ended questions to just solicit some general feedback from the public. And they were, why do you prefer the selected alternative? And then do you have any additional feedback or comments? And feel free to interrupt me with questions at
I
any
have
time.
just a question in regards to, the outreach. Was there any communication with the local school districts and in terms of their ambitions and their initiatives in developing an aquatic center? Was there any discussions with them at all?
So we have a project team meeting. It's the first Wednesday of each month, and they were at the, I believe, the October meeting, representative from the school district before we went out with this additional outreach.
Did they,
We solicited some feedback from them.
Did they share any ideas or them pursuing an aquatic center or a competitive pool situation in any of the discussions that you had with them?
They seemed very excited about the project and very excited about potentially partnering with the city for some shared use with the district. They didn't have any plans, they didn't indicate any plans for themselves to develop any future pool projects.
And that was with the Central Union High School District? Because I heard they have other plans.
Well, we have a member of the Board of Trustees sitting here, so maybe Mr. Childers could tell us, are there in fact plans to develop a second pool for
Well,
the district?
in fact, and maybe many members of the community have received a
Right.
survey from the Central Union High School District to discuss the possibility of us going out for a bond. And as part of that bond, should the voters choose to pass it, which we hope they will, we will
Have an
be
aquatic
trying to
center.
build a competitive pool at Southwest High School for purposes of competition and physical education. That is a late-breaking plan, though. I mean, whenever you made the call, it may not have been something that was on the radar. We've gone through a couple superintendent changes and things like that, so.
Okay.
So the potential concern of duplication, is that even an issue? Or should we even be considering that in terms of, us building a competitive pool if there's potentially going to be one down the road or an opportunity for voters to vote on a bond to fund an aquatic center at the local school?
Yeah, I absolutely think that should be a consideration. I'm not sure that the size of the community really warrants having 2 large competitive
Exactly.
pools. So it should be
Well, I
something.
don't think 6 Lane is considered a large competitive pool, though.
I would
It's
agree.
really
It's
not. I mean,
it's not a large
so
one. It's the smallest you can
That's
be,
that's
right.
where I will kind of be weighing in a little bit, because I know this is going to be a shock, but I swam competitively for like about 15 years. So 6 lanes is way small.
Yeah.
So I don't, and a community our size definitely can use another pool. The fact that we have been, as a city, without a pool since 2006, I think is just absolutely the biggest shame on the planet. And let's keep in mind also where we are with regard to this plan. We're ready to break ground next year after being without a pool, can I say it again, for a decade. So to Mr. Childers' point, even if the bond were to pass in November, by the time the Central Union High School District got up and running with any of this, we're another 3-4 years down the road, and we cannot wait. We need to move forward.
And we would be speculating whether the voters are going to pass the bond. I hope they do, but it's
Exactly.
total speculation. I had a related question as it relates to the adequacy of a 6-pool competition.
Yeah, 6 lane.
6-lane competition pool, and that whether would that be adequate for major events? Probably not. We're traveling about smaller scale events.
So
If
a lot
the
of,
plan really was to become a regional hub for competitive swimming meets, which I think that we have absolutely the potential to become, especially if Calexico is successful getting their pool. We know that Brawley has a very strong swim program. I think the reason El Centro doesn't have as strong a swim program is because we've been without a community pool, for heaven's sake. But to Mr. Silva's point, what would be the cost of adding the additional 2 lanes to go from 6 to?
It's coming. There's a slide on.
Oh, okay, all
adding
right,
2.
I'm just saying that I'm
I asked
thinking,
I asked the
because
same
I'm
question
thinking
yesterday.
10 lanes, 12 lanes,
Yeah,
14
we're-
lanes. Let's-
And I'll just say, to
let's make
speak
it
to the
big.
issue of the school district, going out and possibly obtaining a pool, keep in mind that this would be our public pool, whereas a school pool is not public. And it's regulated by the confines
do the
of
shared
of the
use and
school
all that.
district, yeah. So we're really talking apples to oranges. So continue, Matt.
Okay, thank you. So these are some of the highlights of the public comments. There were a lot of public comments, as you saw, 338 responses. So I had to whittle this down to the things that the task force felt were most important to share with you. I'm sure we can provide a detailed list of every comment if you're interested. So regarding the programming and site layout, one of the big things, and a lot of these comments are about alternative 2, which again was the overwhelming majority was favor of, was to separate the activity pool from the warm-up pool. There were concerns that children would venture into the deeper warm-up pool. Of course, there'll be lifeguards on duty at all times, but it's definitely a concern to consider. And we all feel that if the money is available, it would be much better to separate those 2 pools. Another consideration is if an accident happens with a small child in this joint pool, the whole pool has to be shut down while it's cleaned, so you might have to cancel swim lessons in the warm-up pool because you have to shut down the whole pool. There are a lot of comments about focus on families, focus on all ages of children, from toddlers to younger children to preteens. Provide more than a 6-lane competition pool. We heard that many times, as I'm sure some of you may have gotten some calls and emails.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
You stated that the option number 2 would separate the kiddie pool from the warm-up pool, and so that's what the lazy river concept comes.
Right.
So are we categorizing the lazy river as a kiddie pool?
No, so I may have misspoken. The center pool in option 2 is a shared use pool. It's activity pool and warm-up pool. And the comment that we heard was to separate that into 2 pools.
I
So
see,
we would
okay.
have 4 pools instead of 3.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Got it.
Provide more play equipment for toddlers. Again, option 1 had a much larger activity pool, whereas alternative 2 had a smaller activity pool.
And I guess when I'm looking through these public comments,
Yeah.
I mean, the public comments in my mind support concept 1.
Yeah.
I mean, really, if we're talking about a very interactive children's pool, focus on the family, equipment for toddlers and all of that, then no lazy river, just turn that into a play pool, something else, and keep the other
Well,
Right.
warm-up
I
pool
would
as
say
is.
that,
let me ask a question, if I can, please. Because I was very interested on your previous slide where you asked why you prefer alternative 2 versus alternative 1.
Right.
The overwhelming preferences for alternative 2, but was that answered?
yes,
Okay,
the
is that
lazy
coming?
river is the answer.
Is the lazy river?
Overwhelmingly, everyone loves the lazy river. Everyone's saying that it can be used by all ages. Seniors were really excited about it, just being able to exercise, walk in it against the current, into the current. It provides a lot of space. The amount of people that it can serve is huge. I have a slide that shows you the occupancy of the different pools too. So that was the overwhelming comment we heard was the lazy river is something that everyone was really excited about.
So, I'm sorry, I don't know the answer, but lazy rivers are used for more than just floating around
Yes.
the river. They're used for other activities as well.
Yeah, a lot of aerobics type things. There could be a lot of exercise type classes, those types of things.
What's the depth of the lazy river? 3.6? And then the competitive pool, you said at the shallow end is 4, and then does it gradually get deeper? Or
Yeah, the goal would be to provide a deep enough pool to allow for Red Cross lifeguard certification training.
Okay, so the depth of the pool will get to what, 8 feet? 10? Shallow end of 4,
Yeah.
shallow end of 4, deep end is 10.
We're still working through exactly what the deep end will be with.
Is that common for a competitive pool to have it that deep at the deepest end?
Well, a lot of competitive pools will even have diving boards, and you'll need it to be that deep for those. But the Red Cross requirements, I think there's different levels of certification. So I think we have to still work with the task force to figure out the exact depth of that deeper end. It'll be between 7 and 10.
Plus, if we're going to do any kind of water polo situation, then you have to have a depth of at least 7, right?
7 is ideal, yeah, for water polo, right? Okay.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Well, he's going to keep going through this, right?
Yeah, I have a few more slides here. So a comment to focus on the senior crowd, or many comments to focus on the senior crowd, keep them active and involved, incorporating picnic and activity areas. Other items, overwhelmingly, we heard more shade, more shade, more shade. So we're going to take that comment to heart and incorporate as much shade as we can. And then provide opportunity for children to play and be active. So we also received some comments that I brought some slides to talk about, making sure that there's really good wind and dust protection for the aquatic center. On the top left there, you'll see a lot of times we'll put a curb at the bottom of a fence to prevent dust from coming in underneath and other debris, litter. We also have done a lot of innovative wind protection designs. The key here is to have a wall that still lets some wind through so it doesn't become a wind tunnel that comes up and over the wall. So we understand these are very important design features that we will incorporate as we go into final design.
Will we have stationary blocks like that?
Will they?
Starting blocks.
They will be
Starting blocks?
movable though, right?
They are removable,
Yeah.
but they'll have anchors in the deck.
Another comment that we heard about was keeping the pool cool in the summertime. So the aeration is the typical way you do that, where you just shoot water up into the air, which cools it to keep the water a little cooler. In this environment, that probably won't work well based on all of our experience. So we're going to incorporate pool coolers. They're small coolers to make sure we can keep those pools at the right temperatures during the summertime. So another comment that we heard, and this is a concept plan that we just started. Our next step is to develop a final concept plan. So we just started drafting it by hand. One of the big things we did here was we flipped where the competition pool from the west side of the site to the east side of the site, and we moved the lazy river from the east side of the site to the west side of the site. And the reason for that is because next to the lazy river, we want to provide a nice lawn area or just a gathering space so families can spend time and relax around the lazy river while certain family members might be using the lazy river. And we think that moving the lazy river to the opposite side will give us the opportunity to put a really good shade structure along the eastern side of the parking lot. And that in turn in the afternoon hours will provide shade over that whole kind of grass area. We're not sure if it'll definitely be grass, but that area where families would hang out. So this is a minor change that we made recently.
Let me ask another question. If you go back, right now I believe that there's just an old chain link fence along Adams Avenue on the northern perimeter of the park.
Yes.
What's the plan for that?
That would be removed, and we would install new perimeter fencing around the entire aquatic center facility.
What kind of fencing is being contemplated?
So we're still working through that. I mean, there's some important factors here. We want to provide some kind of privacy probably around certain parts of the aquatic center. We don't want just anyone walking by to be able to look in and see everything that's going on. We want people to feel a little private, but we also need the fence to be secure. In the evenings, we don't want trespassing. So we're still working through that, and we've heard from the task force some of the most important aspects are what I just mentioned.
And we also need to incorporate that, something that looks good, because that's a
Oh, yeah.
major thoroughfare in the
course.
city, and
Yeah.
we want something that's gonna, go with the avenue.
So we have a very sizable budget for the fencing around the perimeter in our current budget. I think $125 a linear foot is what we currently are carrying for the fencing.
We have outdoor showers.
Yes.
Or
Connected to the building, on the exterior of the building, most likely. So having outdoor showers means we can have less indoor showers, which lowers the cost of the building because the building gets smaller. So that's sort of a value engineering
Right.
design feature.
Okay.
So we're coming here to you tonight to get some direction so we can move forward with this final concept plan and move into final design. And some things for you to consider, modifications to that last exhibit I just showed you, based on the community feedback and the task force feedback, are listed here, to separate that warm-up pool and activity pool. We think this is the highest priority as far as a change to the current plan. 8-lane competition pool instead of 6-lane competition pool, additional shade, and then water slides. You can see we listed them in what we think is the priority to the community. So obviously, each of these has additional costs to the project if you add any of these features. So I'll walk through the preliminary cost analysis now.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
on the staff report, it's noted that it is staff opinion that the building area, the office space, and the administrative areas would be too small for the operation. Has that been addressed in some way?
Yeah, so we have received some feedback from the task force that they want, or they would like us to try to incorporate a couple more rooms and some more storage space into the building. It won't get much bigger. I mean, I think we're really close to where we need to be, but another office they asked for, a computer workspace for the maintenance staff, and then additional storage. But for the most part, I think we're really close, yeah.
Just before you get into the fiscal side of the project or the capital cost, could the pool or the aquatic center be designed in a way where if there were new capital or a new cash injection, outside cash injection, where we could add these features to it? For example, 2 extra lanes or a shade structure or a water slide. Could it be designed in a way where we could add those features, 1 year, 2 year, 3 year? We just went through a Vision 2050, and we have our population projection growth to be over 20 more thousand in the next 10 to 15, 20 years. So is the project designed to take on new and additional projects around it? Because it appears to be landlocked and tight.
Yeah. So the answer to your question is yes and no. First, let me talk about the space that we have. We have enough space to incorporate all these things that I just mentioned. The challenge we have right now is the funding. To go back to your first question, it's really difficult to build a 6-lane pool and then go and expand it to an 8-lane pool. That is not something you want to do. It'll cause major problems. You won't even be able to guarantee the construction of the expanded pool, really. It'll be hard to get a contractor to guarantee that. But you could design this site to have, say, 4 pools, right? And then we put one of the pools as an additive alternate. And if the bids don't come in favorably, we don't build that pool. But we can build all the infrastructure to it, all the piping to it. So then later, and we leave that space for it, right? Maybe we make it a little picnic area that later you remove the picnic area and put that additional feature into the project.
So that could be into consideration. And again, just a quick follow-up question. In regards to night activities, I know that in both designs, I see that there's opportunities for to show movies. And so both designs or both options have extensive night and evening capabilities.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, yeah. It will be lit so you can use it into the night, yes.
And then just in the event that we were to get into some fiscal issues and we had to maybe staff it for 6 months out of 12 months out of the year, I mean, is it designed to maybe accommodate where, you know, if we didn't have the operating budget to manage it, you know, 12 months out of maybe 6 months out of the 12, is it kind of designed that way as well, where we won't have the same operating cost?
Absolutely. And in fact, we go into even greater detail with the design where we are going to allow for the option to basically operate half of it for 12 months of the year and the other half only, or basically the whole thing for 6 months of the year and half of it for the winter months, basically.
Great.
And we can even incorporate a way to have just one pool open 12 months of the year and the whole place, the whole aquatic center would be open 6 months of the year.
And just my last question, Mayor, if I may, and I just was wondering if there's any feedback. I know that's ADA compliant, but was there any feedback given in regards to children of special needs and them being able to, or some special considerations for that population in regards to the aquatic center? Was there any feedback, or is there anything that maybe you can share with us that would benefit that particular population?
Sure. So a couple of things. The competition pool per code requires 2 ways for disabled citizens to access the pool, whether it's a lift to lower them into the pool or stairs with handrails. The way we've designed that center pool, it has a beach entry so that both of the activity pool designs, you can just walk right into them. The warm-up pool, if you have it separate, the idea is for it to be 75 foot long and for there to be stairs along that whole long side. So with railing, so it's really easy for seniors, disabled children to access that pool. And the lazy river has similar features, yeah, with ADA access, stairs into it. So all the features, just per code, we're required to do those things.
All right, thank you, sir.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may real quickly, it looks like we're winding down to the portion of the discussion where the council is going to consider making a decision shortly. So I actually own an apartment complex at 641 Park Avenue, just a block over. So before a decision's made, I'm going to go ahead and excuse myself so you guys can take the rest of that up, okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Walker?
I have 2 additional design questions. One has to do with, why did we go with yards instead of meters on the competitive pool?
You want to answer that one?
Why is it being measured in yards instead of meters?
Over the last 10 to 20 years, every major organization competitively switched to yards. YMCA's were the last holdout, and as of 5 years ago, when they moved from Fort Lauderdale to the Greensboro Aquatic Center for their national meet, they too are now competing yards. So it saves us money because it's a smaller footprint, and it's also now the standard for all competitive use.
Okay, perfect. And then the last design question has to do with, obviously, we're going to be charging admission. There's going to be fees involved or a card or something. So walk me through how the public will be entering the facility so that there's, crowd control and all of
Okay.
it.
So the thought right now is for there to be 2 access points into the facility. That gives the staff running the facility more flexibility. The main entry point would be through the aquatic center building, but to have a separate gated entry, maybe off of the parking lot, for example, where you could have monthly card holders come in and not really hold up the main line. And people who are there for a swim meet or a swim lesson, they can have that side access so they can get in and out more quickly. So that's currently the plan.
Okay, and I think that that's really an important consideration for staff, so I want to make sure that staff understands the, mechanics of that, signing people in or collecting money or having that flow.
Can you go back to the slide where we see the concepts? Either one, I think, is the same.
This one?
Yeah, that would work. Recognizing that this is sketch,
Yes.
it seems to me that on the parking lot, that the access, both in and out, are not consistent with our city's standards, because it appears that you have too many access ways in and out. Is that going to be modified?
Yes, this is just a sketch.
Okay.
Yeah. The other exhibits, I think, were showing it, well, let me go.
No, it shows the same format.
So we'll coordinate with city to make sure that that's, okay.
I have just one
Yeah.
more design question. So lazy rivers, I'm thinking, came on the scene, what, 10, 12 years ago? They started popularity. Do we see that popularity waning or being static, or, and maybe is there something else new and exciting out there, a new direction? I mean, having been in the lazy river, it's a little boring.
Yeah, I think that the good
really
things
is.
about lazy rivers are they're people sinks. So from looking at you know, a water park or an amusement park, you're always looking at things where you can put a lot of people that people can enjoy. You know, parents with young kids love lazy rivers. Older people really enjoy lazy rivers. Your active adults, teenagers, 20s, 30s, probably aren't going to be as interested in the lazy
Right.
river. So to your point, is there anything that can entertain that crowd within budget? No. Is there anything that we could plan on to add later possibly that could entertain that crowd? Certainly. There's lots of different things. There's aqua courses, which are like a ropes course and a water park combined. So it's fairly inexpensive, about the same price as a water slide, but you get a ropes experience, plus you get lots of cannons in and around, dry and wet. There are, of course, water slides, which are, I think, will always be popular. There's vortexes as compared to, or as opposed to, a lazy river. A vortex is essentially a circle as compared to a river with water that moves around. Very similar purpose. You can float with it, you can walk or swim against it for therapy, but it happens in a smaller footprint. There are lots of different things you can do. I would imagine, or you know, hazard a guess to say within 10 years, there's going to be some sort of smartphone, PDA, watch, chipped interaction with video games and swimming pools. The technology's not quite there yet because wireless and water don't work well. But I think realistically within 10 years that technology is going to be mastered, and there's already some things on the huge water park side. But for this project right now with our budget, I don't know if there's a better option in terms of providing something for recreation for all age groups and for all programs.
Thank you.
Just to add to that, there, in one of the photos that Ross showed earlier, you can take a competitive pool and you can have blow-up kind of obstacle course, which is low cost, and you know that the young adult crowd would be more excited about something like that. And that's just a programming thing. Okay, so cost. The preliminary capital costs that we have developed, option one, were around 7.7 million plus a 20% contingency, or around 9.2 million. Now, the budget, as we understand it, working with the task force closely right now, is about 8.3 million. So we're off by $1 million. Option two is a very similar cost to option one.
Let me ask
So-
you a question, because
Yeah,
as
go
I
ahead.
recall, in other projects we typically set aside a 10% contingency.
Sure.
Why 20 in this case?
So at this level of design, because we are not even at 30% yet, we typically use a higher percent contingency. It's hard for us to, without design plans, to come up with
So
really.
that could lower later?
That could lower later, yes.
We hope it lowers.
Yeah.
So then, what are the costs of adding these additional features that we've been talking a little bit about? And here they are on the screen for you, that 8-lane competition pool, an extra 200,000 on top of the 6-lane pool. Separating those two pools, the warm-up pool and activity pool, 250,000. If we wanted to put water slides into the design as an additive alternate, that would be about $500,000. And then additional shade, incorporating that into the budget, about another 100,000. So total here, it's another $1 million. And you know, all of these things could be additive alternates potentially, except for the 8-lane competition pool. I can go on to operating costs if.
Is there any questions before we get into operating costs?
What's your experience generally with bids? Are they coming in at expected levels, or are they coming in higher than expected? What's the industry like right now?
Things are getting more expensive to build right now, absolutely. And the valley, the Imperial Valley, historically, over the last few years at least, bids are higher than even in San Diego, which is kind of surprising, but it's true. We actually designed the skate park, so we know firsthand exactly what the bids are like.
And just real quick, in regards to some of the modification, potential modification was 8-lane, warm-up pool, water slide. Do you know, what does that do to our insurance coverage? Or, I mean, does it increase it a certain amount? I mean, I can imagine if we, put in a half a $1,000,000 water slide, that maybe our risk associated with that would increase. Do you know if that's
I would
kind of
say that when you look at the next slide, it's going to be fairly negligible. When you look at the overall operating cost per year of a facility like this, the additional insurance cost for one extra pool is going to be negligible.
Okay.
I don't know if maybe we wanted to have Mr. Morita talk about the Tort Claims Act and whether or not there'd be implications if we.
Might want to have you're part of the Joint Powers Insurance Authority pool, I understand. It might be a good idea to have them weigh in at an early stage to see what effect it might have. There are, of course, Mrs. Walker, you mentioned the Tort Claims Act, so there's a whole process associated with that, as well as various sorts of immunities that are in the law. And obviously, we would want to have the project take advantage of whatever opportunity there might be in that regard. But no question that swimming pools and water features do carry with it a certain level of exposure.
Okay, so operating expenses. So our scenario that we developed to come up with these costs assume that the competition pool and the warm-up pool would be open year-round, and the activity pool in Lazy River would be only open 5 to 6 months per year.
So I imply from that the competition pool will be heated?
It would be heated, yes, and the warm-up pool would be heated. Yeah, absolutely. So expenses, we have come up with some anticipated operating costs. This is a range that we have to develop because it really depends on a lot of different things, final decisions and final design, how we heat these pools in the wintertime. Are we going to use solar or are we going to use all gas, right? So that's why we have a range here. And there is a question that came up from the task force about the additional cost per year of of water slides. There's an OSHA fee that you have to pay each year, and you can see it's not even $1,000. So that doesn't really factor into the actual operating cost. And then the revenue anticipated between $270,000 and $400,000 a year. So the delta there is around $200,000. And it's even harder for us to come up with revenue numbers because we don't know what your decisions are going to be about how much you're going to charge. Are you going to charge different for residents versus non-residents? How much programming are you going to have? Are you going to have swim lessons, for 5 hours a day, every day of the week, all year long? Because swim lessons produce a lot of revenue. They're a huge revenue generator. So that's why we have a range here as well. So I want to talk a little more in detail about income, revenue, and operating costs for an aquatic center in general terms, just to give you guys a better feel of sort of the future decisions and even these decisions about what to incorporate.
Mark, I have one question, and maybe Dennis, could you help me with this? What is the AB in regards to tax? You can only you can only charge what it,
218?
is it 218, AB? I thought it was like
Proposition 26.
the Prop 26?
Yeah, Proposition 26 was a proposition that was enacted in an effort to kind of address the gap that some folks saw in the way cities and other public agencies were trying to generate revenue. there are various exceptions to what is a tax. And this might fall into one of the exceptions, because I believe a fee for service is one of those exceptions, and I can't recall them all. I think there's like a half a dozen of them.
Okay.
But typically, the fee you charge can't exceed your cost.
But when you have a tiered level, when you're talking about resident versus non-resident, is that something that would be exempt from the Prop 26, or would it be allowable under Prop 26?
Generally, I think fees for non-residents are okay. Higher, different fees for non-residents. The theory being that if you're a non-resident, you're not paying the same sorts of things that residents are paying in terms of taxes, and so they're not supporting the endeavor.
Okay.
So
I think that's our current structure, isn't it, for recreation fees and field use fees and things like that?
Just fields,
Yeah.
we don't do it for any of our programs.
No, but we do it, there is that differentiation.
Yeah.
And we could end up with differential for seniors, children.
Okay. All right. Continue. Thanks.
So this is, these next couple slides are based on years of experience. Aquatic Design Group helped me develop these. These show you where your revenue is going to come from. You can see that, the vast majority of revenue is coming from recreation admissions and swim lessons. In fact, you can see competitive meets really don't generate much revenue at all. So if you're really looking to try to have this facility come as close as possible to break even, those recreation amenities are really important. The next slide shows you where your expenses are going to come from in general terms. You can see that between the labor and the benefits, 43 and 17%, 60% of your expenses is from your staffing of the facility. So just being creative about staffing, which things are you staffing, which times a year? Like I just mentioned, having a staff who's giving swim lessons all day, that staff is probably making you a lot of revenue. But other staff that are just lifeguards might not be generating as much revenue, especially for a larger competition pool. So then this last slide shows you in general terms, again, the estimated cost recovery of different types of pools. You can see on the far left, competition-only pools, don't even come close to break even. When you have a mix of competition and recreation, you get closer to between 70 and 90% is usually what we're seeing as far as cost recovery. And then when you have just recreation, you can even have a facility that's making profit each year, potentially. So final slide here, and then.
Can I ask a question with regard to the revenue?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Did we consider whether or not any of the existing school districts may be interested in renting the pool, either as part of their physical education program, or maybe for after-school events or something like that?
Right. So again, it's really hard for us to estimate all types of different things. Like for example, the answer to your question is no. We didn't really specifically add that into the analysis. But all kinds of things like how many picnic areas do we have that are group rental areas? How many specific shade structures are just for group rental? And how often are they being rented and how much are they being rented for? All those different factors, there's different little things we can incorporate into the design to get you closer and closer to that break even.
Well, and two, to the extent we have competitive swim programs that would be interested in utilizing the facility, did that factor into the revenue side of it?
Yeah, just the typical,
You
just
look
from
at the
our
meets,
experience, is
right?
that the meets don't bring in
Right.
much revenue.
But-
we didn't anticipate like rental of the pool by a swim team, no.
Right, because I think that could be a big source of revenue.
Mm-hmm, okay.
Let me ask another question. At what point in time will you be doing your landscaping plan for all the open areas? Is that part of the overall design?
Yeah, so I'll go to the schedule in a moment, but the goal is to start, basically the final design would start as soon as possible, and it would carry through the entire 16. So the landscaping, we'd get into that maybe around April, May of this year. We'd really start getting into that.
Maybe El Nino will kick in as we expect, and the drought conditions will be over. But Norma, will the drought conditions that we have right now and the restrictions that we have any impact on the landscaping?
Definitely, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're familiar with the current restrictions.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So my last slide is just to talk to you a little bit about our current schedule. And this is kind of contingent that we can move forward, that we can get some good direction to move forward. So final design anticipated to start as soon as possible and carry through 2016. Go out to bid in January of 2017. We anticipate it'll take about 4 or 5 months to actually get all the contracts in order to get the contractor out there. So we'll break ground in May of 2017 is our goal, and the goal would be to be open in the summer of 2018. And I have a couple other slides if you want me to go to them real quick just to answer some of the questions that you had earlier. So occupancy slide, this is an important one that you guys had asked about. I won't go through all the numbers, but you can see on there the Lazy River obviously has the max occupancy of any of these features. So if you're trying to serve more citizens, it's a really good feature. We don't have up there the water slides, but you can imagine one person goes down at a time. They have to wait for it to be clear for the next person. They don't serve as many people as some of these other features. Okay.
In regards to, the size of our city and the design that we have before us, do you believe that is adequate considering the size of our city? And that's kind of, I'm trying to reference, usage.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious to what your feedback would be in regards to that aspect.
My opinion is that there is no facility like this in the valley, and that you're going to draw from a lot more places than just your own residents. So if you were able to incorporate all of these optional additions, I think that it would be well used then. If you can't incorporate any of them, you might have a situation where you have to stop admitting people because it is so popular, and especially in the summertime, in the evenings, I think especially. There is, these occupancies, there's fire codes and that kind of stuff. So at some point, you would have to stop letting people in if it becomes too popular. And the more water we provide, the higher the occupancy rate goes up. Right?
Yesterday, we talked about the water slide specifically as far as the initial upfront cost and then the operational costs associated with maintaining it because of the personnel, typically 3 personnel just to operate the water slide. And I'd asked you specifically if what was the potential income revenue stream from that, and would it generate income as opposed to costing us? And
Right.
I'd like you to answer that.
So I actually have a slide for that too, I think, here. And this is a tough question for me to answer, to be honest, because, wait, let me go back to that real quick. I didn't show you this slide. This is that current occupancy of the building, that party room that we talked about, 80 people for standing or rows of chairs and 40 for people seated at a table. So the water slide operating costs. The reason why this is so hard to gauge the operating costs is because we're not sure exactly how you anticipate charging for the water slides. A lot of times cities will require a special wristband to use the water slide. So you have to pay an extra fee to use the water slide. You get your admission, but you're not allowed on the water slide without the wristband. So that's why we have such a big range here. The operating costs around $100,000 a year. We're anticipating if it's only open for half the year. And 2 lifeguards will be able to staff it because we're anticipating we would have a flume kind of run out water slide instead of a pool at the bottom. That would again save costs. That number I gave you earlier, the $450 capital cost for the water slide, assumes 2 water slides with the flume run out instead of a separate pool that you land into. With the separate pool, the operating costs go up more because, like you said, you need 3 lifeguards instead of 2. The OSHA cost is minimal, $365 a year. And then the revenue, again, I had to have a really broad range and assume that you're not going to charge anything extra to use it. So that's where my 10,000 number comes from. But if you are going to have separate wristbands and that's how you're going to operate it, you could get pretty close to break even, we think.
Let me go back to follow up on a question that Mr. Cardenas asked and a comment that you made earlier. I think his question was, is this facility as we have it adequate for the size of the city of El Centro and the expected growth that we see into the future, and recognizing that we're landlocked, recognizing that we don't have enough money to even to build what we're hoping to build. I think the concept of planning for the future is really important, and also set up the basic infrastructure for future projects, so that maybe not us here, but future councils will be able to make this grow and expand to meet the future needs of the city.
Right.
That's something that I think is really important.
So I agree with you 100%. One idea is, right now the concept has 3 pools, right? But if we separate that middle pool into 2 pools, then we have 4. And then we add water slides too. Then we have 5 different pool amenities. We could have 2 of them be additive alternates, like we talked about earlier, where we still plumb all the utilities to them, and the actual feature could be installed later. So in the base bid, we would have the 3 facilities, 3 pools, and then the additive alternates. If the bids come in real good, maybe we can build 1 more. And then the 5th one becomes something that gets built later. Or if the bids don't come in as favorably, the 2 additive alternates become things that could be built later, potentially.
Yes. Mr. Garcia? Yeah, I guess at this time, since while we're, in case council has any more questions, we'll reserve those. We've got a few comments from the public. Start with Laura Driscoll. Is she here? Like to come up and speak on this issue? Oh, you said you didn't want to.
I didn't particularly want to speak, but I will.
Okay.
I was wondering if the fencing, is there any way we can bring out the old look of the old pool with the fencing,
The old plunge facade.
the old plunge?
And I believe that that's been one of the comments from many citizens is the desire to have some kind of facade that replicates the old plunge. So I think that's something that the design team is looking into as far as cost and design.
Yeah, I was thinking the fence might be the best place to do that, but have you considered that?
That's a great idea.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Mr. Phil Heald.
I'm sorry to come in late on this thing, and even tonight I looked at the agenda and I thought by the time I arrived it wouldn't even be started, so I missed a little bit at the first. But I've been very, very involved in a number of things over the years that I think give me qualifications to make some comments here, and I'm disappointed that I didn't get a chance to serve on the committee or the group that did the planning, because I think I could have given some good earlier input. But be that as it may, you know, can't have everybody on it, too many heads confused too. I was glad to hear Mrs. Driscoll mention the old plunge, because I was the chairman of the group back in, I think it was the early 70s. I was also that put up the building that replicated the plunge building that was originally torn down. The experience I've had, I also was a swimmer in high school when the first time they had a swimming team, and we had a hard time finding pools in the wintertime because it's so cold in this community that the pools weren't put into, the plunge wasn't put into service until after school was out. And we were trying to compete with people over in the coast who had, in San Diego and Long Beach and so forth, we would go over to those meets and they'd been training and competing all year long and all year round. And we were at a disadvantage, although we really had some pretty good results because we were all around athletes. We played football, track, et cetera, et cetera. But I also later have operated a facility, the Jocks and Jills Health Club, that now has a different name. Ephraim was a regular user there, and Cheryl.
I need to go more often, Mr. Joe.
We had an outdoor pool, and I later, after building the place, we had a couple thousand members at that time, and a lot of kids came, and a lot of serious swimmers used it. But we had a real division between people who wanted the water at 75 at the swimmers wanted it cool, and the paddlers wanted it, and the ladies that did the water aerobics wanted it to be 90 degrees, and we had to find compromises all the time. I wish I had put 2 pools in so that we could have kept 2 different temperatures to try to satisfy everybody. We couldn't, but the other thing that I wish could be considered here, and we know skin cancer is a major problem, and swimmers or water users in general that don't have shade over their heads are going to have problems later in life from overexposure to sun. I don't care how much sunblock they put on. Shade should be a major consideration. The other thing I wish, if I could have made the suggestion, I would have always said there should be a structure over the pool that's going to be used for the people that are doing a lot of serious swimming, so that in the summertime it can be shaded. In the wintertime, some kind of insulated sides, canvas with insulation in them could be dropped down, which would cut the heating bill on the water and also make it much more usable on a year-round basis. We have a very windy climate at sometimes a year. Lots of sunshine in the wintertime, but a lot of wind. And it gets pretty cold here, too. I'm sure you've probably studied the weather patterns here as part of your considerations. But I think the weather considerations should be very definitely looked at. And I also would applaud the idea of some of the facilities, perhaps since you're short on budget, be held off for a while if they can be planned for and phased in. I think that's a great idea. But I still hope that they'd look into this thing of shade and seasonal side covers on at least one of the pools so that there would be a true year-round training facility that would work for us here. The other thing I would be very careful about, I would suggest, having run a lot of youth programs out of the club, we weren't able to charge anything near what more affluent areas charge. And if those revenue figures that you're looking at are based on a different economy than this, I suggest you familiarize yourself with this economy's economics, because there are a lot of folks out there who would like to use the pool, but they're not going to be able to pay the kind of fees that people in Orange County or people in Palm Springs, Palm Desert can afford. So your revenue is going to be much more limited. So that's a caution. Don't be too optimistic on that revenue thing, or you'll find yourself laying an egg there. So anyway, those are my comments. I'm really happy to see a pool moving forward. I was stricken when I first heard that they were going to remove the pool that we had here, and it's been several years now without it. And we need more water facilities in the county, so there's no question what you're doing is a great thing. But I think there are some areas of caution, and I think the thing deserves a lot of study in that, in the economics and the weather patterns. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Hill. Okay, Ms. Sanders.
From this distance, Mr. Mayor, I would like to ask the individual that worked with me as part of our task force at the time, to come forward and we can do this as a tag team.
That would be fine.
Sedalia Sanders, member, community member, and former member of your task force.
Hello, good evening. I'm David De La Garza.
I truly appreciate the opportunity, Mr. Mayor, to stand before you and talk about the value of this particular aquatic center. As you may recall, some of you may recall, some number of years ago, we did a parks plan. And in there was the outgrowth was the MLK Indoor Sports Complex and the skate park. Now, to make that trilogy complete would be the aquatic center. I am very appreciative of all of the robust questions, the very spirited questions you asked the design team, because those were the same questions Mr. De La Garza and I had when we sat before them. We also had the distinct honor of serving with Mr. Campos, who was our staff member, and on occasion we had Mrs. Villacana. And I can tell you this task force was very deliberate, very thorough, and very complete. The issues that was presented by the design team telling you the number of people that would want to see things in a certain way, we heard the same comments. Now, I know we're in a funding shortfall. Mr. Jackson, you recall that you and I traveled to Sacramento and really lobbied hard to get a portion of the money, that $11 million from that bond. We were successful, but we weren't successful in getting the other $4 million that we had anticipated. Had we been successful in getting those two funding streams, this would not be an issue. So what do we do today as we move forward? I noticed on the agenda you will be looking at your CDBG funding. And I recall some number of years ago, we took the long view. I think Ms. Walker may recall that. Mr. Silva may recall that. We took the long view and we placed all of the money that was available in the CDBG funding for a community project. And I would suggest, as you begin to look at how you're going to fund that, you give that strong consideration. Because I think that's this is a very viable project. Now, let me back up a moment and just talk a little bit about what the high school had said they would like to see accomplished. I did get a call from Mr. Preciado. He led me to believe, this was after we had worked, and I wanted you to know that my last meeting on this committee was November the 3rd a.m. before we had our reorganization on November the 3rd p.m. So I've been working on this for about a year as your member to the task force, along with Mr. De La Garza. We took this task serious. We were very, very thorough, and we were appreciative of you allowing us to serve in this capacity. Now, I'm going to be going probably sideways a little bit here, and I apologize if I lose your train of thought and don't catch up with my train of thought. But Mr. Preciado from the Central Union High School District did call me. And he said he thought he would want me to be a part of a task force as they began to look at whether or not they were going to float a bond. And their intent was to build a pool. But they had more than just the pool in mind. It was a pool plus other things over at the community school, or what we now know as Desert Oasis. And I said, you know, if you're going to float a bond, there's several things you might want to consider. Number one, I had just received my tax bill. Property tax in certain areas had gone up. So you're going to be asking each resident or homeowner to pay X number of dollars in addition to that per $1,000 valuation of their property. And the second piece is, I know you all meaning the school district, had sat down with us and talked with us, the task force, regarding our aquatic center. And I said, are you telling me you want to build something that would duplicate what we're doing? And if so, what then do you anticipate I would provide as an individual that would be giving you input? About 2 weeks later, he called me back and he says, you know, we're not quite ready for you yet, Sedalia. We want you to stand down for a while. We're going to first do a survey and then determine the direction that we're going to go. So with that in mind, yes, we heard that, at least I did. But as was said by our design team, the school district did come. And Mr. Silva, you may recall in your 2050 vision, they were there. We saw pictures of them where they were there talking about things. And as we plan for the future, this to me will speak to the issue that was raised by Mr. Gardenis. Is this a facility that would accommodate the growth of a community, the size, the present growth, the present population plus the growth? Now, we know our population has two bookends. We have a large number of youth, meaning K through 12, and we have a large number of seniors. I don't mean seniors in high school, I mean seniors like me that are senior citizens. And those two bookends was what we as a task force, Mr. De La Garza and I, were trying to figure out how do we actually fold those in to make sure that our citizens will have their recreational opportunities. In the past, this council has been very, very interested in expanding recreational opportunities for all of its citizens. So I would encourage some deliberation, some thought, and maybe some boldness. I noticed that Mr. Nunn spoke about boldness in his prayer. So in that boldness, look at your CDBG funding and see if that cannot be used to, I want to say, augment the cost of this project, because I think this project is worthy, and I think it's needed, and I think, Ms. Walker, you're correct. It's about time. 10 years is a long time. Mr. De La Garza?
Well, I have nothing further at this point. You pretty much said everything. Pretty much, she hit the nail on the head.
It's hard to follow.
Yes, absolutely. She hit the nail on the head.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders.
And it has been an honor serving in the committee.
One final note. I want to applaud your city attorney here, Mr. Morita, for talking about that proposition that passed. We know there is a difference in what you charge as fees, and fees can be charged as long as it's for cost recovery. And so I think in that regard, I also want to take into consideration the comments made by Mr. Heel, saying that maybe some of our fee structures would have to be somewhat minimized compared to what we would see on the coast. Or when I say coast, everything is the coast if it's outside of Imperial County. But I think we already know that. I think those particular pieces we are well aware of. And as you move forward, I have no doubt that you will take all of that into consideration. So I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you, Ms.
Sanders.
Sanders.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. De La Garza. And thank you guys for being members of the task force. Did we get our slip, or is that for another item? Okay. All right. Anybody else from the public wanting to speak on this issue? Okay, coming back to council.
I have one
Questions,
more-
comments?
I have one more design question, and then I have comments. seeing more pools going away from chlorinated water to salt water. Is that part of the consideration for this pool or no?
The current plan is chlorinated water. I'll let Justin talk a little bit more.
I don't want to get into a big chemistry discussion right now.
You could just tell me yes or no, we're doing chlorine or we're doing salt water.
We've assumed so far to do chlorine. It's not too late to change to salt water if there's interest in it. I think that's a sidebar that should probably be had with city staff.
Well, I think one of the things we need to look at is the maintenance cost, because I've been told, haven't done the research, haven't done the chemistry either, but that, especially in this climate, that salt water would be less costly.
Yeah, if you're looking at life cycle costs or about a 25-year cycle, salt water can save you a little bit of money. However, the system to system costs about 2 times as much in initial costs. So when we're looking at a hamstring budget, it's very hard to make that decision at the front end. But once again, the opportunity is still there to do that, and I think that's something as design develops that we visit again.
You know, I just have one. I needed to give an email some due diligence, so please don't shoot the messenger on this. But I did get a request to follow up to determine if any of the 2 options could accommodate synchronized swimming.
So if we go to a 10-foot depth pool, then you could accommodate practice for synchronized swimming.
Okay.
You cannot accommodate competitions.
Okay, thank you.
Well, will somebody address Mr. Hill's comment as relates to shade, additional shade?
So shade over the top of the pool itself, I mean, that would be a very expensive addition to the project. The idea that what we're going to strive for is to shade as much of the pool as possible. So if we can incorporate shade along the western edges of the pools and the southern edge of the pool, that's where you'll get the most bang for your buck. So we'll avoid putting shade along the northern and eastern edges and focus it on the western and southern edges. We can, of course, study it more, but I will tell you for sure that will add additional costs. Yeah.
And that might be something that could be an added design later on down the
Sure,
line.
yeah. I mean, what you could do is you can build the footings for this shade canopy that could go over the whole pool, right? Which would be low cost to just build the footings so that you could come back later and build something over top of the whole thing, yeah.
Maybe some notations on that just to see what that would consist of.
Ross is taking lots of notes.
Yeah, I see.
So essentially what you guys are doing right now is putting it in place where you're using basically the geography of the terrain. where the sun's
Absolutely.
gonna be in order to try to shade the maximum amount of pool.
Absolutely.
Then maybe you can put some infrastructure to expand that in the future.
Right. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, a shade that's over the entire pool, it might not be as effective as a shade that's like to the west of the pool by 15 feet and to the south of the pool by 15 feet. A shade that's over the top, the entire pool might end up shading the street adjacent to the pool, you know? So you have to be really careful, and we do detailed shade studies as we progress through the design of projects, especially projects like this.
So what specific action are you wanting from us today? Are you wanting us to choose a concept or what
Yes,
specifically do you want from us?
I think we need some direction on how to move forward with the design. That's what we're looking for. So I think the main questions, if I can go back a couple slides here, are those additional alternatives that we talked about, and how do we want to incorporate them? Do we want to incorporate every one of those? So these were the 4 additional revisions. First, I guess, is the council comfortable with moving forward with alternative 2, which is what the public was kind of.
I think in our staff report, it's noted that as is, we're about 1.2 million short.
Yes.
And so adding some of those alternatives would increase that deficit.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
But that's 1.2 million short if we include the 20% contingency.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think,
Okay.
I was gonna say, I think what, in speaking with the design team yesterday, where we are today is, they're at a wall at this point. They need to have direction from us, whether option 1 or 2 is what we'd like them to consider moving forward, and then what additional modifications to add to item number, option 2 is what the public has asked for. The potential modifications to option 2, which is in priority, is the 8-lane competition instead of the 6-lane, which would increase the cost by $200,000. The separating of the warm-up pool and the activity pool, which is another $250,000. If we go with water slides, another $450,000, and then additional shade is another $100,000. So roughly, we're adding another $1 million to that if we add all 4 of those components. If we want to move forward with just a couple of those components, they need direction from us in moving forward so they can actually get a final design.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may follow up, I was hoping to get additional context behind where the 1.2 million is going to come from. And it appears that we're approving a project with a deficit. And I'm just, again, I'm very supportive of the project, very pleased with what's been presented, but I'm still concerned that there's not additional context behind where we would get the 1.2 million.
Right.
Now, I hear that CDBG is an option, but other than that, is this going to come from our general fund, or where is this money going to come from?
Can I address that?
Yes.
Or at least comment? Okay. I think that we absolutely have to dream big here. This is going to be the only pool constructed in the city of El Centro, I can guarantee you, in the next 50 years. Let alone, whatever high school does, it's going to be a mini version of something that we come up with. Remember how long we lived with the plunge? And that was the only city pool that we had that was public versus a private pool. We tore it down a decade ago. We have a whole, we've had kids in this city that are now 10 years old that never knew that we had a swimming pool. We will not have an opportunity again to make this decision and do it right. And that's why I think that we need to move forward with building a beautiful pool that meets all of our needs, which means we build an 8-lane competition pool. We have a separate warm-up pool and activity pool. Skip the water slide. I think that it's probably a little too pricey for what we need right now, but we go with the additional shade. I have a question. We have an item on the agenda for tonight that says an additional $700,000 allocated from CDBG funding for the aquatic center. How does that play into the numbers to get to Mr.
Reduces it a little bit.
Cardenes's point?
First of all, when the request was submitted for consideration for CDBG, at the time, we were looking at a $700,000 shortfall. However, as has been pointed out, the team has been working, and we've obviously made contact with utility companies, in particular the IID and the Southern California Gas Company. Well, they have informed us, and they've given us a preliminary number, which is in your staff report, that we anticipate with some relocation that has to take place to add an additional $500,000. We were not anticipating that. And so we put in for $700,000. However, and you'll see in the later presentation, with some of the funding that is available through CDBG and funding that has not been expended for some projects, we are able to recommend, or we're going to be recommending, that at least $400,000 be set aside for this project.
Okay, and the other comment, and I want to figure out where Leticia is right now. Is she not in the room?
She stepped out a minute
Oh,
ago.
thank God. Okay, so while the finance
no,
director, I was going to say, while
She
the
was
finance
ready to
director
Yeah.
Just step back outside.
okay, but remember, guys, think of all of the allocations where we have set money aside in reserves for things in addition to just our rainy day fund. Can we not repurpose that at least for a year or so to get this pool built the way we want it to be built?
I totally agree with you, Ms. Walker, in that we need to do as
Dream
much
big.
as we can, dream big. But to me, they have to be realistic dreams. So if there's a plan that would conceivably work, then I'm all for that. But if we know that there's just no way that we're gonna be able to come up with X number of dollars, then we work within what we have. And some of these other areas, we build them as,
But part of
future
that, we're
projects.
not, well, I think that what we're asking for tonight, though, is the design. And what we would then do is put together our bid documents so that those are built as extras to the extent funding comes in the future. I think what I would like to see tonight is additional comments from the other members of the council as to how they envision this pool to look. And the other part of the direction that we give is for staff to figure out, how do we fund that gap? There has got to be a way. See, oh, even Leticia is shaking her head yes. So that's a good sign.
I think,
So
you
I
know,
think we can do it, guys. We just have
I think
to
that,
move it forward.
you know, it's interesting that, that Mr. Nunn started our invocation today with comments, not knowing what was on the agenda probably, as far as talking about being bold. And I think that, I agree with Ms. Walker. We will never build another pool in our lifetimes in this city. And we only have one shot at this. And so, yes, we can nickel and dime it, we can cut corners, we could do a 6-lane pool and then kick ourselves for the rest of our lives, because the ability to take care of the growth of this city is never going to be there. And to Matt's case, you know, you can't go in there and start tearing up half of a pool and expanding a pool. It just doesn't work that way. I think that we have a exceptional staff. I think we have an exceptional council that has always been fiscally conservative and has always thought of the big picture. And I realize that we're going to have a significant shortfall in this project. But I also believe that the experience and the knowledge that we have within this council and within our staff will be able to close that gap, whether it means that we go to Sacramento, whether it means we apply for grants, whether it means we dip into our reserves, maybe temporarily.
We gotta
I
do
may
it,
hear about
man.
that later, but
Let it just our heart attack.
yeah, but you know, and we've got the best finance director in the county that is going to make sure this is happening. So, I mean, this is our corridor for our city. This is where everybody's going to see. And I agree with a comment, I can't remember who made it, Russ or Matt. This isn't going to be an El Centro pool or aquatic center, because there's no aquatic center in the entire county that's going to be anything like this, which means the usage is going to be tremendous. And I just think that this is our opportunity to do it right. And so, yes, are we going to be looking for funds in other places? But then don't we always do that? I think we always do that. So this is a thing that 10 years is way too long to have no pool for our citizens. And this is our one chance to make it right by our community. So,
And you know, I just wanted to add, if I may, I want to say I agree with Councilmember Silva, and the reason why we've been so good in our finances is because we have planned. The reason why we have reserves is because we have planned. And again, I'm not necessarily in opposition to this, but you know, this was a AA presentation. It would have been AAA if we would have had a backup plan to say, okay, look, this is the deficit, and these are the target areas of revenue that we're going to be going after to go over to accomplish this deficit. In fact, there's even more news now that we have some utilities there's some utilities that we're going to have to look at that's going to add an additional $500,000 to the cost of this project. So again, it would have been very, very helpful if we did have a plan to address the deficit. And that's the only thing that I'm struggling with is, you know, what is the plan to accommodate, instead of saying, okay, you know, hopping on a plane and going to Sacramento. Well, you know, that may be the case, but it would have been very nice to have that in the presentation this evening.
Ask for
It
it for next
continues.
meeting then.
we can. I think that in giving, I don't want to put Leticia on the spot today unless you're prepared to. Oh, she wants to be on the spot. Come on up, Leticia. Tell us how we're going to fund this.
Good evening. Well, as you recall, during my mid-year budget presentation, I mentioned some of the projects, upcoming projects, and some of the funds that we had set aside for those projects, whether it be the aquatic center or the library or so on. There's two sources. We have our fund balance, and we really don't want to touch that. We want to be able to preserve our fund balance. We also have some other funds that we had separated for redevelopment funds, which we had separated for the library or police station. we could use those funds for this. If that is the priority, then we can use it for the aquatic center. However, with the understanding that the other projects will have to take a back seat in order to accommodate this one this year.
You know, I'm all in favor of moving forward with the Cadillac design. But I also like to hear from staff maybe in the next month or so and tell us, you know, what options, what plans may be out there to be able to fund the project. I do agree that the $500,000 for water slides, that would be among my last set of priorities. I think the other additional shade, as Mr. Hill suggested, would probably have a higher level of priority for me than a water slide. But I'm all for doing it, but I want us to also begin to think about how we're going to pay for this.
And did I hear you say then that if we did tap into these other funds, then that would jeopardize potentially the future development of our library?
It would delay until we build up to the amount needed for the public library. Is that was?
But that's just one option. I mean, there could be other options, correct?
Well, it's either that
Or
fund balance, yeah. Basically, at this point, it's those two. I mean, you do have the funds available. It's just that some of the other projects will have to take a back seat.
And, you know, and I understand, I think Ms. Cardenas is gonna chime in regarding the library, and I'm also a very strong proponent of us moving forward with the library also. And there's other things in the works that may come to fruition that will alleviate that cost, and I could share that with you on a sidebar. But I think that, you know, this same conversation might come up a year from now when we're sitting here doing the library. And the same situation is we'll never build another library in our lifetimes either. So when you have it in front of you, you've got to do it the right way. And, you know, I'm sure somebody's going to help me with this saying that the penny saved is a, no, that's not the one I was looking for. What's
The pound foolish.
Yes.
Penny wise and pound
Pound foolish, yes, that's the one my dad used to use all the time.
Oh, thank you, Jason.
I'm glad you knew it, but, you know, but you know, it's just, I am absolutely convinced that this is the way we've got to go. And this is what our residents would want from us. And yes, we're going to have to make some tough choices. We might have to set something back a year, or we might have to get some creative, you know, funding and do some things outside the box to make some of these other things work. But right now, we don't have the library in front of us or the police department in front of us. We have our aquatic center, which is going to be the last anchor of our recreational hub on Adams Avenue. And as I think Ms. Sanders said, this is the anchor to the trilogy of what we envisioned for that area. So my situation is, and where I'm at is, I would like to see all three components minus the water slides and option 2. And, you know, it doesn't always mean that when the bids come in, if they're just way out, we might have to huddle up and do what we did with the skate park, you know, and that's always the option. What we're deciding here is we're giving direction to our design team to come up with the final design so we can release the RFP. It doesn't mean that that's the check that we write at the end of the day if it's totally out of whack. So I think that's just what they're asking for, some direction. So
Would it be okay, or, I'm sorry, Mr. Garcia, but would it be not necessarily add a condition, but that they do come back next week with the formal presentation in terms of funding options or how?
I think
Doesn't have to be staff.
Letitia would, and I think design team can also assist with that, but what do you think would be a realistic time frame for you to come back with some financial options? I mean, I realize we have two options. It's either fund balance or the building fund.
Do you want
But-
that in writing? I
No.
can
No,
have it tomorrow.
but, okay, so,
It's only two options,
That's
really.
right, we only have two
okay,
options.
but, so
Yeah,
for
one or the
example,
other.
We're planning to set aside some CDBG funding for 16-17 for the aquatic center, right? It seems to me that the timing would allow us to also consider setting aside for 17-18.
Yes.
Or maybe even the third cycle, I mean, who knows? So those are the kinds of things that I think we need to explore.
I think that would be helpful.
Well, I think that could be spoken of tonight. I mean, because that's something that Marcella is already anticipating, is that we're gonna be basically conditioning our funds for the next 2, possibly 3 cycles, because we need that to offset some of the and maybe even further on down the line, because we might be needing it for the operational side. So, I mean, the options, I'm not sure that we really need a finance report next month, because Letitia's right, we only have 2 options. We either take it from the fund balance, which we would prefer not to do, or we take it from the building fund, and
When do we make that determination?
when the RFPs come in.
Well, we can do it during the budget cycle as
True,
well.
yeah,
I mean,
and-
we can tee that up for the next fiscal year, for the 16-17 fiscal year, and just say we're gonna allocate X amount to the construction of the aquatic center. And that'll have ramifications with the
something?
different fund balances.
There are also some grant opportunities out there that the task force and the design team fully intends to apply for. But we don't put those into the numbers because there's no guarantee really.
Yeah.
But they happen every year, so we'll continue to apply for them.
I would think that this community lacking a pool would be a poster child for
Yeah.
a grant application.
Right. And I heard recently that there's in the November ballot, again, you never know what's going to happen on a ballot, but the state's considering floating a park bond, which would open up $500 million for this California cities to apply for money. Now, if that money became opened up, I'm sure we could get $1 million or $2 million for this,
Yeah.
if not more.
I think what we do is we allocate through the budget the dollars necessary for this project out of our building fund, but that's just a marker, a placeholder. And we expand and explore every single possibility, whether it be grants, whether it be, lobbying our state officials for any kind of monies that might be able to filter down to our city on this project, and we just pursue those.
Oh, I have one, a naming opportunity.
Yeah. Naming rights.
Mr. and Mrs. Heald.
$1 million.
If you commit tonight, we'll discount it by 50,000. We'll
Yeah.
make it $950 for you.
There is just a clarifying question that maybe we may need. I know that, I guess the council feels comfortable with option number 2. However, is there a certain preference as to the orientation of the elements? Meaning, we did put up the sketch that was drawn with the lazy river being on the western part of the site. Is there a certain preference, or maybe as part of the design, we can look at where the best location is?
You know what? One question is when you're talking about the seasonal closing of certain elements of the aquatic center, how best do we control that? As far as I know, the major entryway is going to be through the building facility, but at half the year we would actually not be utilizing the lazy river. Would that be correct?
Right.
So is this configuration better or the other configuration better as far as locking down part of the aquatic center?
They both allow for that.
Okay.
This allows for more shade in the area where the families will be, where there'll be, more people picnicking, spending time on the grass, relaxing.
Okay.
That's what, and also, mostly more shade for the lazy river area where we feel that's where the majority of the people will be. That's where we'll have the picnic areas and that type of stuff.
The only, and I love the conceptual design of this, except the one issue, and I think Mr. Silva might have brought it up, is come up with a really good way to do something with this basin, because we're all, as we said, this is the corridor to our city, and so that's going to be a concern.
Yeah. We've heard that from the task force as well.
So, is council comfortable with direction?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Yes. I think you have your direction, and I look forward to our next task force meeting when you have something nice and pretty for us.
Do you mind if I repeat the direction, just so
Sure.
we're clear?
There we go.
You've had this situation happen before, I see. Good.
So we're going to design the aquatic center to have 4 pools, a separate warm-up pool from the activity pool, an 8-lane competition pool, and add additional shade in the neighborhood of $100,000 into the project design.
One question, if we did decide to add water slides down the road, is that something that you'd be prepared to do as like a phase 2 with the existing infrastructure? Is that something you could plan ahead of time? Or is that something we'd have to commit initially to?
You would want to commit initially to plumbing the utilities and siting where it would be so that you can have it, so you don't have to knock out other existing stuff to put it in, basically, you know? And that's something for us to easily incorporate into the design as well. We'll redesign the site to incorporate all 5 facilities, but the construction documents would only show the infrastructure, all the underground utility lines, water, and so forth to that 5th site, which would have the water slides.
I'd like to see the infrastructure, to see how much that would cost.
Okay.
To keep that open in the future.
And that could, again, be an additive alternate. You know, when we go out to bid, we can have a base bid that we think is around what the budget is, and then we can have all these additive alternates. And you can decide then, you know, okay, well, that additive alternate for the infrastructure for the water slides, and the bid came in at 100,000. Now, do we really want to build that now or not? You can make that decision
Right.
a year from now.
I think that'd be a good component, at least to see.
Yeah.
And then we can make a decision at that point.
Okay.
All right?
Thank you all
Thanks
so
again
much.
for hanging in there.
Yeah,
Thank
thank you.
Does anybody need a break?
Yeah.
Okay. We're going to recess for about 5 minutes, and then we'll come back.
Take a 5-minute break and come back in 15.
Yeah. Isn't that the way it usually is? Okay. We're back in session. We will move to item number 6, discussion and necessary action regarding ordinance number 16. Do we know what that is, Diane? 1602? An ordinance of the City Council, City of El Centro, California, amending sections 2-55 and 2-60 of Chapter 2, Article 3, the City Code relating to the Personal Appeals Board, waive reading and approve first reading, authorize city clerk to place on the next agenda for second reading, and approve revision of the city personnel rules and regulations, Chapter 14, Section 14.6, evidentiary hearing procedure. We have a presentation by Ms. Starr.
Okay, what I have before you is revising the city code that relates to the Personnel Appeal Board, which will add an evidentiary hearing officer. So it's changing the process slightly in regards to disciplinary appeals. We currently have a Personnel Appeals Board with 5 members. So we're adding the evidentiary hearing officer who will hear all the evidence from both sides, the employee side, the city side. They will make the final decision, and then that will go to the Personnel Appeals Board, which will actually be an oversight board to the hearing officer. The Personnel Appeals Board members will review their decision and the information that's given to them from the hearing officer. They will either confirm their decision or send it back for review, and then it could go back to the Personnel Appeals Board.
I have a question. Have we thought about expanding the number of people that sit on the Personnel Appeals Board and then just stating that, let's say we have 9 people that are designated as members of the Personnel Appeal Board, but we only need 5 of them for a hearing?
We would probably be in the same position we are now, trying to get scheduled board members.
I'm just thinking, is there, in addition to what we're doing here, which I think is absolutely the right way to go, should we also then think of taking the second step of naming additional members to the Personnel Appeals Board, so that if you can't get all of those 5 members scheduled, you have like a pool of 9, and you have to have 5 of them present? Would that make it easier?
In addition to the hearing officer, or, I mean, that's a possibility, but right now, we only have, what, 3?
3, I think.
3 out of 5. We haven't had a 5-member board, I don't think, since I've been here.
The other problem too is once the hearing starts, those same 5 people would have to be part of the entire process.
Right. We can't alternate
Right.
some at some meetings.
Yeah, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying, if you only have a pool of 5 and you're having a difficult time getting those 5 all on the same page, what if you had a pool of 10? And you had to get 5 for a hearing? I mean, it doesn't have to be part of the decision tonight. I'm just saying, if we're looking at ways to streamline the process, maybe one of the things is you just develop a bigger bench.
That's a
That makes
possibility.
sense. That makes sense.
It's almost like
We
having a
could-
bunch of alternates.
There
Right. We could look into that. Because the Personnel Appeals, the actual board, the 5-member board, is not going to have to meet as often as they did in the past. The
Right.
hearing officer is going to be handling that. So it's reducing it almost in half, trying to schedule all these meetings. As the staff report states, our last hearing took 14 months. So that's, and there's a lot of information that's provided at these hearings. And so for members to have to go back 14 months from day one to make a decision, it's really not fair to both sides. So this hopefully will speed that process up to be done in a timely manner.
And did you say we currently only have 3 of the 5 that are actually filled?
Correct.
Yes.
We had Dr. Murphy.
Oh, no, he hasn't been on the board for a
No, but
long time.
didn't he just step down because he moved?
Is that, I don't recall who that was, but we just also had a notice of another resignation, so that leaves us 3.
Okay, so we need to work on that.
Okay, that's something we can look into. Also here for your approval is revising the personnel rules and regs to add the evidentiary hearing procedure into the disciplinary appeals process. I've already taken this to the bargaining groups. They have all approved it. Some have it in their MOU now, and some don't, so we need to revise the personnel rules and regs to add that.
I have a question. What type of qualifications is the evidentiary hearing officer going to have?
We're looking for, there's not a whole lot of requirements. We are looking for preferably an attorney or anyone that has been in the hearing process, that has done HR and heard appeals process. But they cannot be a city employee that has worked for us in the last 10 years.
Okay, any other questions?
I have a question on the discrimination complaint form, which I think is on agenda packet, page 28. So we asked the alleged discrimination was based on what factor, check all it apply, but we don't have an other category. So do we think that we've identified all of them?
I'm not sure what.
Those are all the legally recognized.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
What
We
page,
have,
I'm sorry.
The agenda page for us, it's packet page number 27. On your
28.
agenda, it's 6A. Doesn't it?
28.
Here.
Oh, yeah, 6A on the top or page 28 at the bottom. It's a discrimination complaint form from the Imperial County, which I guess we're just using theirs. Might want to change our logo on it.
I'm sorry, that's an error. That should not be part of this packet.
I was,
Oh,
I was
okay.
trying to figure out why
Sorry, yeah,
the
it's
document was
the
there.
discrimination
That's something
complaint
else I'm
form.
working on for a different project.
Okay, never mind.
It got attached
'Cause
to
I'm
this
like,
somehow.
why is that there?
I
We
was
might wanna
completely
change
lost.
the logo when that comes back in front
Okay,
of us.
never mind.
Yeah,
Never mind.
no, that's something
Okay.
else that's being in the
The
works.
working out of class request form, that shouldn't be part of this either?
I'm sorry,
There's another page in our agenda package. It's called working out of class request form.
no, that's not part of this. I don't know
Okay, good.
how that got in there, but
Let's see,
no.
let's keep going. What else do we have?
No, that's not part of this section. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, no worries.
Any other questions? Seeing none, look for a motion to introduce ordinance 16-2, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of El Centro, California, amending sections 2-55 and 2-60 of Chapter 2, Article 3 of the City Code relating to the Personal Appeals Board, waive the first reading, and authorize city clerk to place on next agenda for second reading and adoption. The approval to revise city personnel rules and regulations, Chapter 14, Section 14-.6L, evidentiary hearing procedure. I have a motion by Cardenas, second by Silva. Please ballot. Passes 5-0. Thank you, Mr. Arm. Okay, item number 7.
As by way of introduction for both items number 7 and 8, I'm going to be stepping outside and recusing myself as Mr. Marita, interim city attorney, rents space from my husband, Walker and Driscoll, and insofar as I have a community property interest in Steve Walker's law firm, I'm going to recuse myself from items 7 and 8.
7 and 8, okay.
I'll be outside. And it's really cold out.
We'll make it fast so we can come get you.
Right, Brian?
It is.
Although we left Ryan out there quite a while.
That's
Okay.
non-billable.
We'll talk about that.
Item number 7 is discussion and any action regarding the approval resolution for the interim city attorney, and presentation would be, I guess, Mr. Maria, are you doing, or Dennis?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, council members. As you know, in December, you took action on 2 different agreements involving me, one to fill in on an as-needed basis in the absence of the leaving of Ms. Becker, and then in connection with the Personnel Appeals Board. At your last meeting, it occurred to me that the arrangement that Mrs. Walker just referred to, I'm a tenant of the Walker and Driscoll Law Corporation, and I pay rent, and Steve Walker has an interest in that corporation, and Cheryl Walker has a community property interest in her husband's interest in that corporation, and that would amount to, under the Political Reform Act, a disqualifying conflict of interest. And so that's why she's recused herself and left the council chambers. Out of an abundance of caution, the thought was that even though you took an action on both of those agreements, that you should do so again without her participation. Because as I'm informed, because after the last meeting, I spoke with the city manager, and he confirmed what happened. And so once I found out that indeed Ms. Walker had participated, the thought was bring it back and have you either rescind what you did and do it again, or go a different direction, whatever you decided to do in that regard. So those comments apply to both 7 and 8. One is the doing work for the city on an as-needed basis. I believe the agreement that you already approved is attached again. That's basically all it says. It really doesn't refer to title. It basically says that a majority of the council or the city manager can utilize my services as needed, and so obviously if they're not needed, then they're not used. But so those comments apply to both number 7 and number 8 on your agenda.
Okay. Any questions?
So Dennis, using the term interim or associate or something else is not as irrelevant?
I suppose, for my purposes, I mean, as I think I indicated to you last time, my thought was to, I grew up here in El Centro, basically been here all my life except for school, and so if the city needed some help, I'm happy to pitch in for the period of time between now and when you decide what you're going to do to provide those services. So it's really no practical consequence to me what you call me.
Yeah.
So if the council has some preference in that regard, that aspect isn't on your agenda tonight. So I would suggest that if you're going to do anything in that regard, that it be at a future meeting. Although, like I indicated, neither agreement makes reference to any particular designation or title. It just says, as needed, I'll provide services.
And for purposes of the rest of the council, I met with both Mr. Morita and Mr. Childers after our closed session, and we had a conversation, and we did actually look at both contracts, and neither one of them specify titles. And so at this point, what's in front of us now is just to ratify the arrangement or the agreement with Mr. Morita, and then moving forward, we would probably see another item come back in 2 weeks. involving the actual title and designation.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
is that gonna, I mean, my only concern is that this actually says discussion and any necessary action regarding the approval of resolution for interim city attorney. So does that just take into effect the office, or does that take the actual title? That's my concern.
That's a good question. I know it's agendized that way, but the actual agreement says something different.
Well, if you look at your recommendation, it basically says resolution, rescinding resolution 15-130 and approving an agreement for legal services to assist the office of the city attorney on an as-needed basis. So that would be the action I would recommend. And then whatever you want to do going forward with respect to clarifying the titles.
So long as we can clarify the title, then I have no issue with the recommendation.
Would we, what is your recommendation, Mr. Morito or Mr. Childers, as far as, I think we had decided that maybe because it's not agendized, that the actual titles be resolved at a further, at our next meeting? Or is
Yes.
there, that would be the preferred measure at this point?
Right, because if you're going to take action in that regard, and frankly, as I sit here, I don't know that there was any formal action taken in December in that regard. But if you are going to take some formal action, it's not on your agenda tonight, so I would suggest that it be on your next agenda or whenever you decide to put it on.
That's fine. And Norma, can you make note that we would bring that back as an agendized item at our next meeting? So so we all know what we're voting on and what the issue is we're just approving the actual contract for Mr. Morita's services, and without any specific title attached to, yeah, that one, without any title attached to the actual agreement.
Oh, just so it's clear, but the action in 2 weeks will be related to what then? What follow-up action is there?
Can we speak on
Well,
that, or?
Oh, yeah, well, that's a
Yeah,
good point.
as I understand what you're talking about doing at your next meeting is, and I could see some housekeeping reasons for staff knowing, like who's going to sign approved as to form on your ordinances and your agreements and things like that. Frankly, what's appeared on documents that I've signed so far, sometimes I've been referred to as city attorney, sometimes I've been referred to as interim city attorney, and sometimes I've been referred to as associate city attorney. So it's been, yeah, it hasn't, it's been different things, so.
So what we'll
And
try to do.
mine has been consistently inconsistent as well, so.
At least we're consistent.
That's right.
So I think what we'll do is we'll bring back, ask staff to bring that back on our next meeting to clean that language up and to specify titles and duties. And I think in my meeting with both Mr. Childers and Mr. Morita, the arrangement is going to be left to both the attorneys and our city manager as far as how that works. I think the dynamic, we all agree, has been working fine, and they both agree that the dynamic of working together and doing certain elements of our city business is fine, and they can work that part out. So, okay. We have a motion by Silva, second by Garcia. Any further discussion? Please ballot. And then we'll take item number 8. I'm sorry, passes 5-0.
Somebody get short.
4-0. No, we still have item number 8.
What?
We have one more.
I'm sorry.
Did it register, Diane?
It's registering on my screen here as 4-0 with one abstention.
Okay, so motion passes 4-0 with one abstention. And we'll move to item number 8, which is the approval of resolution for the Personnel Appeals Board for legal services with Mr. Morita, and that's resolution 16-07. Any discussion or questions? We have a motion. Motion by Cardenas, second by Garcia. Please ballot. Same count?
Yes,
Motion passes 4-0 with one abstention. Now we can bring in Cheryl. And
Mayor, that concludes the items upon which my input might have been needed, so with your permission, I'll excuse myself.
yes, thank you, Mr. Childers. At this time, we'll move to our final item, item number 9, discussion and necessary action related to proposals received for CDBG program year 2016-17, presentation by Ms. Piedra.
Yes, good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the council. And of course, we have been discussing throughout the Aquatic Center presentation this item, which relates to the discussion related to the proposals that were received for funding consideration for the Community Development Block Grant Program. As you know, every year, given that we are an entitlement city, we need to go through this RFP process to allocate our funds. I do have a presentation, and we did distribute updated handouts for you, as we did notice that for the request that we received under Public Services for Catholic Charities, in particular, House of Hope was actually $20,660 instead of the $10,000 that was originally included. So I have a brief hopefully a brief presentation on the proposals that were received. We closed this RFP process on January the 4th of this year. And so as our process has been, is we bring before you a summary of all the proposals that were received, and then we obviously look for your direction as to what projects we would incorporate in our annual action plan for this federal program. So here's the summary of the different proposals, and actually we categorize them based on the type of activity that we can fund through this federal program. We actually have a category of public services. And as you can see in the presentation, we have 2 proposals that were submitted from Women Haven, one for their transitional shelter program that they have for $20,000, and then also for their emergency shelter program for $20,000. And then Catholic Charities has 2 proposals that they actually submitted, one for their shelter for $20,660, and then for their senior nutrition program, which is $20,000. We also received a request from the Police Athletic League in the amount of $10,000, and of course, we have fair housing that we fund from this particular category. This is a contract we have with the Inland Fair Housing Mediation Board for $47,250. And then we did receive a proposal in the amount of $13,000 from the Imperial Valley Boys and Girls Club for an after-school program that they have. Now, with respect to this proposal, we did deem it ineligible, and the reason being is they don't go through any kind of eligibility process for their program. Therefore, that's a requirement of CDBG, so we couldn't recommend funding that program because of the fact that they don't go through that process. Under public facilities and infrastructure, we did submit $700,000, of course, for the Aquatic Center project. And then we also received a proposal from Community Development for the code enforcement program. As you know, we do partially fund this program through the CDBG, and of course, other funding comes from the general fund. The proposal here is $69,300. In terms of housing activities, we are recommending setting aside funds for lead-based, asbestos offsite, and also housing rehab. Staff did submit an application to the state for federal consideration through the home program. Unfortunately, because the state received almost 90% reduction in home funds, they were not able to fund applications. And we were actually in the top 20, and unfortunately, they were only able to fund like maybe 4 applications statewide. Wow. But they did indicate that, if there is funding available, they may, fund the rest of the proposals, but at this point, we have been basically denied. And then we did receive also a proposal from Grid Alternatives, which is a nonprofit agency that's providing installation of solar power equipment here in the Imperial County, and their request was for $35,800. And then we are requesting for planning administration. Basically, this is covering operational costs associated with this program in the amount of $65,150. So in terms of the funding available, I have to say that even though we have been advised by the Department of Housing and Urban Development to allocate based on the current allocation that we have, there's always the possibility that it could be reduced. And so as we go through this process, because we don't find out until later into after the plan is submitted, how much our actual allocation is going to be, we do allocate based upon our current allocation, which at this time is $501,991. That's how much we're getting from HUD. In terms of that breakdown, as you know, we have caps. We cannot spend more than 20% on planning and administration, and we can't spend more than 15% of our allocation in public services. And also, whatever is remaining, we use for other eligible projects. So from this amount of direct allocation from HUD, if we get this amount of money, we can set aside $100,398 for grant administration, and then $75,299 for public services, and of course, the remaining balance can be used for other eligible projects. We also do get some program income from state grants, and we anticipate about $31,690. Again, we use the same caps, so very, as you can see, very minimal funding there available for administration and public services. We do also, some funding is not spent in some programs. For example, this current program year, we do anticipate not expending $48,600, so we can reprogram those funds for projects during this particular CDBG cycle of 2016-17. We also have some program income monies that basically are uncommitted, and part of that includes some funding that was designated for Colonia. Unfortunately, the state also did not give us that funding, so we were able to have that money available, which we can commit for a future project.
Marcela, on the, those uncommitted funds, do they have to be used for other eligible projects?
Yes,
And
yes,
they
that's
cannot be
correct.
used for
Public services, no.
public services? No.
So in total, what we hope, again, for sure, we know we have the, reprogram funds and the uncommitted funds because we do have those funds available. But hopefully we will have $750,337 for projects for this particular program year. What I try to do, hopefully to simplify maybe the potential distribution of these funds, is I try to separate how much we can spend and how much we're recommending per category. Under the grant administration, even though we can allocate up to $100,398, we are requesting only $65,150. So that potentially leaves behind about $35,000 for other eligible projects. Under the public services category, again, recommending that we, obviously, because I know historically we've done that, is set aside the maximum allowed per allocation and also CDBG program income. So that gives us about $80,000. However, as you know, we do have a required activity, which is fair housing. And then there's been a new program that countywide we have been required for many years. This county has not been compliant with the homeless management information system. And as you probably are aware, the county has contributed about $70,000 for the actual implementation of this program, and it is being actually administered at this time by Catholic Charities. And so the City of El Centro, being that we are a federal entity and we get federal funding, we have been asked to contribute towards the administration and towards this program, but it has to come under public services. And so we anticipate that $5,000 would be set aside for this contribution from this funding. Therefore, what we would have available for public services would be $27,803.
So that 5,000, or if I may, Mr. Mayor, the 5,000 is suggested, or is there some statute behind it, or is there
No,
some terms and conditions behind it?
Basically, that's the minimum amount that is needed as part of the city's contribution. One of the things through the Imperial Valley Homeless Task Force is Mr. Johnson, actually he submitted a letter to our city manager indicating that the City of El Centro, they would like for us to consider at least contributing $5,000, given that there is other money through the county that's being used for the implementation and operation of this program.
And the reasoning behind it coming out of CDBG is what is the reasoning behind that?
Basically, because we're talking about, this is a federal required program. As I said, this county has been basically non-compliant in that sense, and the Catholic Charities has actually is doing the contract for them to actually operate this system.
But could it come out of maybe, for example, general fund, or does it have to specifically come out of this
It could potentially come out from another source. However, at this time, again, because, it is for the benefit of a federal program, we are requesting that it be set aside from these funds. And it's kind of a situation where it almost is along the same lines as fair housing, because we are required to report the number of homeless that are being assisted here in our county. And so that's why, through the Imperial Valley Task Force, Mr. Johnson is going out and seeking funds from other cities, because we all benefit from this program. And if we are getting federal programs, which obviously most of the cities in the county are, we need to be set up in this system.
Is there some reportable action that comes out of these county meetings? I mean, is there something that he's reporting back to the city in terms of, what's being done?
In terms of it-
In regards to the homeless population and?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I mean, right now, they just are concluding the point in time count. And there's different strategies that are done. I mean, we are part of that task force as well. The city of El Centro is.
Marcela, on the.
Yes.
As I recall, under the fair housing funding, as I recall, it has historically been 45,000. Did that go up this year?
Yes, it did. We did see an increase on their contract.
Yeah. So they requested the additional money, or?
Yes, we actually have a 3-year contract with them, and that was included in there. So for other eligible projects, and we try to bring in the different amounts allocated to kind of show you what the total is for other eligible projects. Basically, as you may recall, I did indicate that we're not asking for the full amount that we can get through grant administration. And obviously, the $326,294 is what's available for other eligible projects. And then we also have the $48,600 that we have remaining that we could use during this program year. So total for other eligible projects, we have $410,142. And then through CDBG program income, we have $26,936 and $168.96. This is just strictly for other eligible projects. We already deducted the public service amount. So total for other eligible projects, we have $605,174. Again, for purposes of simplifying and for maybe to assist the council, because I know sometimes it's a challenge trying to distribute these funds, and even though it's a very small amount, I know it's very tough to make these decisions. What we're suggesting that maybe council consider is of the $605,174, and again, given that we did not get any housing money, that we set aside at least $130,000 to be able to at least hopefully complete maybe 2 housing rehab projects. And then also, of course, consider the code enforcement program, which, as you know, has been a pretty successful program here within our city. And then setting aside for the aquatic center project, $405,874. So that would take up that $600,000 that we have potentially available. And that's my last slide. So if there's.
Can we talk about this report?
Yes, absolutely.
And Marcella, just a preliminary question. This is all self-reported by the providers as to actual numbers served?
Yes, that's correct.
You'll probably understand why where we're going with this is, looks like there's some data missing for House of Hope for the 15-16.
Yes, basically, and this is part of your packet as well. We include this to indicate what have been the accomplishments, in particular for the nonprofit agencies that receive our money. For the House of Hope, at this time, they have not requested their reimbursement. That's why you see a 0 accomplishment, because we do not reimburse or provide any money unless we see accomplishment. So that's why you see that 0 there, particularly in the 2015 year, which is the current year that we're operating. You can see that we do indicate there the requested amount that is requested by the agency, and then we put to the side what we actually end up awarding to them.
I know we have representatives from House of Hope here, and there is a request to speak, so maybe when they come forward, there can be an explanation as to at the end of the presentation when you come up, and also an explanation as to the falling numbers of actually served. I mean, that's a great thing, I'm just kind of wondering if that's a trend that's going to continue.
Yep.
Okay.
And then for senior nutrition, as you can see here, these are their accomplishments. And what we ask for when we solicit these proposals is that they give us a projected number of individuals they anticipate serving with what they ask for. Obviously, when we get these proposals, they base it upon the amount that they're requesting. So if you see the reduction is obviously attributed to the fact that we do end up giving them less from what they request. So for senior nutrition, for the 2015 year, we actually ended up, setting aside for them $12,000, and they have expended funds. And so right now, at this point, they have 48 people that they have actually served.
Okay, so preview of coming attractions, when this item is addressed, and clarification if this is the congregate meal sites or home delivered.
And then we have Woman Haven, which, is for their emergency shelter. They have expended $10,053, so about 50%. And they have actually served 46 clients. Transitional housing, this is another program that was funded. We gave them $5,000, and they have actually served 44 at this point. And that's their accomplishments. One of the things that is very, very important, and we emphasize this with any organization, including our own city departments, that is very, very important that when we provide funding to them, that they expend it, and they expend it on time, because we do have an expenditure timeliness test that's done in April. And so it's very, very important that they expend these funds. So we always encourage that. And we've had some agencies that we have funded in the past that have had expenditure issues, and staff in those instances is very hesitant to recommend any kind of funding because it does create issues for us. So I just want to make sure that I emphasize that we are very, very diligent in terms of making sure, again, that not only the nonprofits, but also our own very own city departments make sure that we expend our funds within a timely manner.
Any other questions? We have quite a few slips for public comment. Bring up the first one, Mr. Robert Mosier.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. So to address your question, Ms. Walker, it's home delivered meals.
Okay.
And our goal was 100 when we asked for $20,000. When we were reduced to 12, we submitted an amended contract document that was 80. And we have 48 as of the end of December, 57 as of the end of January, and we're rolling 6 this week. So over the course of the period of time, we'll reach up to that 80, much as, or exceed that as we did in the previous year. Part of the difficulty, and this is not a criticism, just a comment, by the time in which we get awarded the contract, executed a contract, it's October 1st, not July 1st. So we have 9 months to run a program rather than 12 months. And so the ability to spend the money and to reach the goals gets collapsed into a smaller period of time. But with senior nutrition, 100% of the funds that you allocate go strictly to food. And given our current caseload, which is 57 for the city of El Centro, we only charge prorated amount of our food costs to the meals that are eaten by residents of El Centro. And we always finish spending that money by March, within 6 months, and then we continue to count the meals. So these particular figures, although a moment in time, our goal last year was, with that 80, was 6,000 meals, and we served 15,000. So the actual benefit is great. When I was here in October, I mentioned a statistic that is increasingly the case. We currently, throughout the county, have 124 seniors average age over 75, all frail and homebound, who are participating in the senior nutrition program, home-delivered meals. We have 120 on a waiting list. So every time we have reductions in funding, the waiting list gets larger. These are seniors that have no alternative in terms of their food, no alternative in terms of their visitation, but the senior nutrition program to keep them alive. I would want to share with you in closing a gift we received in December from a teenager, a young woman from the area of Holtville, who is a member of the 4-H club. And she sold her champion goat at auction and donated the entire proceeds to the senior nutrition program to feed seniors.
Wow.
That gift from that young woman, in the manner in which she gave it to help seniors, motivates and moves people like myself and our staff to want to continue to do our advocacy with members such as yourself and other bodies. We've been to the county Board of Supervisors every year, the past 3 years, asking for funding from them to increase their share so that no senior goes hungry, no senior is left without their daily bread because of lack of resources. So this body has been a leader for a number of years in supporting senior nutrition. I thank you for that, and I ask for your continued support.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you.
Moser.
Any questions for Dr. Moser? No? Okay. Next we have, what's wrong one? Trying to keep them all together. Lupe Rodriguez.
Good evening. Lupe Rodriguez from House of Hope, Program Manager. Thank you for having us here. So we're here again this year. And
I'm Martha Ransom. We're going to just double dip so we can get us done.
Okay, I have one for you
I'm the
too.
Director of Homeless Women's Services. I'm Lupe's boss, but she really runs the show.
so I just wanted to briefly describe our program. And House of Hope is the shelter for homeless women, women and children in El Centro. And in our fiscal year, 117 people were housed, 53 adults, 64 children. 77% of those who left and completed the program moved into permanent or temporary housing. So we are requesting CBD funds to help offset cost of serving homeless families, to cover operational costs, insurance, equipment, supplies, maintenance, repair, and 10% of our case managers.
Well, I was just going to address your questions earlier that Ms. Walker asked. I actually have no idea where these numbers came from. I think in our early years, whenever we started the CDBG program, at least 15 years ago, you remember, Liz? 14. Then we understood that we would be reporting on the number of people using our program. We guessed at about 100. That was before we actually knew. And then once we realized the restrictions later on that really CDBG requires you can only provide services for El Centro residents, that changed the dynamic drastically. Our numbers are usually, we serve about this last 2 years in our application, we served 45 El Centro residents through the year, each year, out of 120 people. That's really what we should be reporting on. Where these numbers have come from, I don't know. We never had 160 as a projected people from El Centro, that 2014-15. We're also surprised that there's no report for this year because we do report regularly, so I'm not sure what's happened, whether we have a breakdown. Yeah, something's wrong. We'll have to find out because we're doing our part, turning them into our business office. We were told our business office sending in reports, but we'll get it straightened out. We're doing the service, that's for sure. in our application this year, we just figured out a different way to talk about what you're funding. It costs us about $27 per bed night per person, and we figured with a $20,000 grant, we would have 827 bed nights, which is about 25 families for 30 to 60 days, depending on the size of the family and all of that. We think you're getting amazing value for your money. We are getting 65 to 70% of our folks are going on to permanent housing, and we think that's the point of having shelter, is help people get out of homelessness. We certainly work with the other agencies, as you know, and we've been very successful in bridging those gaps between services so people get coordinated support, and we're trying to get them out of homelessness. Did that answer your questions?
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We do appreciate partnering with you. And we know you have a tough job, $27,000. And if one more comment about the HMIS project, while we would love to have the City of El Centro support our efforts, if you decided that this year is not the year to support us, we would live with that because we plan to go back to the county to ask for more. We're actually enrolling several agencies. We're getting good data from our database, and we're hoping that we will come back and start reporting to you so you can hear what we're doing. And our continuum of care is actually very active, and I think you'll be pleased with what we've been working on. But we'll come back another time and talk about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, we have Paul Cleary, Grid Alternatives.
Hi there. Thanks, Mr. Mayor and City Council. Thanks for the opportunity. I just wanted to come. My name is Paul Cleary. I'm Executive Director of Grid Alternatives. I just wanted to come and introduce you to our organization. I'm here with my colleague, Brian Gonzalez. We're a nonprofit solar installer. Basically, we use a barn raising model to bring solar to folks who wouldn't otherwise have it. What that looks like is today we're out over off State Street with putting a system on the home of a family, a low-income family, and we are using volunteers, in this case students from CET that had been studying green building and solar, and they came out and worked with us to get some hands-on experience, hopefully lead them to a job. We also had some community volunteers out there. So that's a system that'll save that family over $750 a year, every year for the next 25 years or more, money that they can use for food, clothing, swim lessons, other necessities. So just wanted to take this opportunity to introduce you to the organization. We are new here, founded and based in Oakland, but new to the Valley and just getting off the ground. So I wanted to take the opportunity and happy to answer any questions or show you around a project site of ours when we have that going on. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Questions? One question. Where are you based out of?
I work in San Diego. Brian and his colleague are here, still trying to locate office space, but located here in the Valley. We're looking to hire one other individual as well. So we do have a presence here and looking to build on that. So.
And it was just related to residential development?
Yes.
Is
right
it low
now,
income driven or?
Yes, we're we use the same income guidelines as federal HUD guidelines to look at folks, low income homeowners.
So is this similar to the HERO program that we currently have, or no?
The HERO program is actually attached to the property taxes. So I believe this is a grant.
We're a nonprofit. We raise money to give solar to people who couldn't afford it. So that would be a method for folks to get solar, to finance solar. The folks we work with typically are falling a little bit below the requirements of that program and other programs out there. So we're trying to fill that gap and making sure that this technology gets to everybody.
So some quick math with the help of my calculator, because
Yeah.
I can't do it in my head no more. It equals out to about 3,200 plus per client. So what do residents get for that? And is that the cost of the project, or is the project subsidized by other grants in other places?
We do leverage that money. A typical system like the system out there on State Street is about $16,000 to $18,000, and so we're leveraging that money with what every other nonprofit person is doing, right? Fundraising. There's a rebate program. We have partnerships. We are a national organization, so we do have partnerships with national solar companies, suppliers. We bring equipment to the table, and basically, I think one of our strengths is that we do leverage those investments to a pretty great degree. But yeah.
So what's the value of the equipment and installation that a resident or homeowner would get?
Well, The value of the equipment, I guess, is probably around $15,000, $12,000 to $15,000, throwing a little bit of our labor on top of that. And that's a system that, those systems, I'm not sure how much you know about residential solar, but those systems, basically the equipment is warranted for 25 years. The panels and inverters are warranted for 25 years. They're going to produce for a long time. They're going to provide that savings year on year. Regardless of what happens to electricity rates, that savings is going to be there. So, and to me, that's the important thing, is the savings, right? It's the money in folks' pockets and the workforce training that we can provide as part of that project as well. I'm sorry, did that answer your question?
You're working with CET, is that one of your partners?
CET, let's see, CET, we've done projects with SDSU, Imperial Valley, Ivy Rop as well. We're starting to work, Brian's working with One Stop as well. So part of what we're doing is recruiting volunteers, looking for folks that might have an interest in the solar industry to get some training. And then a lot of our outreach to homeowners is actually with partners as well. And a lot of word of mouth. We're working also with Citizens Energy, which I know has a presence out here. So yeah, that's how we're.
I think if you have a project coming up that you're going to be working on, it'd be nice if you could let our staff know, and
Sure.
they could let the council members know in case we want to come by and just see what
Sure.
one of those projects looks like.
Happy to do that, and I know it's super short notice, but we'll probably be we'll be over on State Street on tomorrow and Thursday. But I know it's short notice, but yeah, we'll definitely keep you in the loop.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Gina Vargas.
Hello, good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. Gina Vargas with the Center for Family Solutions. I'm here to say thank you for the funding that you've given us in the past years. It really helps, makes a difference to those that we serve. We continue to serve victims of domestic violence as our primary targeted population, but in addition to that, we also have homeless women and their children, and we've actually seen a larger population of single older women coming through our shelter who are also in need of shelter and to maybe go through a second, third stage of their lives and trying to find ways to get stabilized. So we see quite a few of diverse populations coming through our shelter. I did see our statistics up there, and I'm sure that they were read to you earlier. We have been receiving quite a bit of individuals coming through our shelter. I believe in the ones just for the El Centro area that we showed you is 150 something, but we actually, in our shelter, both shelters combined, we served over 220 individuals through there. We were able to do that mostly because we had a grant through the Rapid Rehousing, and that's through the Emergency Solutions Grant. And what they work for and towards is set to try to get the individuals out into permanent housing within 30 days. So our case managers have to move pretty quickly, work with the landlords to try to get them out. So that's what we've been able to do, a quick turnover to be able to move them into their own house, which is stabilizes the client and their children and gets them back into a safe environment within their own home. So that's how what your funds do complement the other funds that we do. This next fiscal year that's coming through, I'm not quite sure how the Emergency Solutions Grants, they're taking a twist on it. We're actually going to have a 3-month gap where we will not be receiving funding for July, August, and September. They're going to do their process a little bit differently. Their funding structure is going to be a little bit differently, and their this year we were pretty rich with funding, and I'm sure that you guys seen that in the paper. Next year, not sure how that's going to go because this year they're proposing to only give 200 and something thousand for the whole Imperial County. Right now, we are a recipient through our Emergency Solution Grant, which helps us pay for our shelter, our rapid rehousing, and our homeless prevention grant. With that 200 and some, and that also funds Catholic Charities as well. So we receive over 500,000 combined here locally. That's going to be reduced over to about 220,000 or 200 and something thousand. So there's going to be a big impact for those that we serve, and we have to try to see how we're going to meet that need. So when you guys do make your decisions, you guys can take that into consideration, and we are continuing to find other sources, but we try to do our best. But we thank you very much for your guys' time and your decisions that you make to make impactful decisions.
Gina, hate to ask you this question because I think it's not an easy question to ask and probably a more difficult question to answer. But you saw that our funding availability is very limited. We have $32,000 to spend on these kinds of projects and a lot more requests than that. Can you tell me if you think, you requested funding for transitional shelters and also for the emergency shelter? If we had to choose, is there one that where you see there's a bigger need than the other, or would you want to split evenly between the two, or where's the highest level of need?
The highest level of need is in our emergency shelter. That's where we had 156 individuals that we served and passed through there. The funding that you give actually helps us a large, we can only use it in certain ways, and wages are very slim, so we try to put it in our operations. So that one actually helps us maintain our shelters facility. It helps us get those individuals to their doctor's appointments, to get their kids enrolled in school, helps them get their social services. And especially when it's hot outside and 120, instead of having them wait at the bus stop with an infant child who's only 2 months old, waiting there 20 minutes to get on the bus, we're able to either transport them in our vehicles or if not, put them on a taxi to go meet that need. So it's kind of hard to decide as to where, which one to fund, because both of them are needed, and also pays for the maintenance, some maintenance of our facility for the upkeep. You can imagine 156 people going through a residential dwelling. It's quite, impactful. And it also, we have another facility for a transitional shelter that also helps maintain that facility as well. But our biggest impact would be the shelter.
Any other questions for her? No? All right.
No, I just have a comment. I think, Ms. Vargas, having worked with you for a really, really long time, I have to say, I so appreciate you being candid and upfront with regard to the grant funding that you received, because we did all read about it in the paper, and it was the elephant in the room. If Women Haven did receive the $545,000, how is it that you're coming to ask for funding right now? So I think that was really remarkable, and you to be commended for that, being forthright and transparent.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Marcel, I think.
Yeah,
Ms. Cardenas has a
if I
question.
may, Marcella, I think I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, sir. It's Dr. Moser. He made a comment about not getting funding until September, and it really turns a 12-month program into a 9-month program.
That's correct.
Can you kind of give me some context behind why that works that way?
Basically, the reason why is because we don't get our actual agreement from HUD until about August. And by the time we bring the agreements to council for approval, it's about September when we get our program started.
So,
It's a federal issue. It's not a local issue.
So there's no way in adjusting the RFQ or the grant process earlier so they can get it? I guess my question would be, why would we ask for a 12-month program?
Well, basically, it's the program year, the federal program year is based on a fiscal year. And it either starts in July or it starts in October. And with the city, it's tied to basically July. However, like I said, it takes time for them to, review our plan and then turn around and give us their standard agreement. And so we don't proceed and we don't approve any funding until we get that agreement signed by, the director of HUD and then also the city manager. Otherwise, if you, for whatever reason, would fund them earlier, you run the risk that it would come from city sources.
Yeah.
It's very common.
And every year we've seen in the last 2 years, we've had a decreased number.
Exactly.
From the original number that they actually already had agreed on.
Right.
And I think, and a lot of, obviously, as you can see, many of these nonprofits have participated in this program since we first became an entitlement, which is 2004. And I think they have adjusted, to that months that are lost. But that's just the way, unfortunately, I wish it was sooner, but that's not the case.
I appreciate your response. Thank you,
Sure.
Marcel.
Questions? So now we come to the part that we always dread every year.
Okay.
recommendations, comments?
Well, I guess what I want to make maybe clarity, because I did hear a comment that the 5,000 could be deferred. So instead of looking at the 32, are we looking at the 27 in terms of funding opportunities?
This question really depends on as Ms. Ransom pointed out, at what point do they need the contribution from the city? This actually was talked about in the previous program year. However, given that the county did contribute funds, we did not advance this, or we didn't consider it at the time. And so as she pointed out, if they can operate it for this upcoming program year with funds they have from the county, then that would relieve that $5,000. But if the contribution from the city is expected, then we would have to consider the 27,000.
Who would ultimately make that decision?
As far as the county contributing or the city?
Well, what is the trigger that makes it either we have to or we don't necessarily have to?
I guess I would defer that to the House, to Catholic Charities, given that they are the ones that are administering the program. Like I said, we did get the request, and we did talk to them about, when we would consider that contribution. We knew that potentially we would do it during this program year, but, I'm not sure if they really need the contribution in this particular upcoming year.
Yes, please.
Well, the circumstance is that the $70,000 grant that we proposed to the county to set up HMIS was to have the bulk of the money used in the first year to enroll as many agencies as possible, because the first year we were paying for the licensing fee for every user who's using the database. The grant allows us to defer that cost the first year to get more of them in. But it's been a very slow burn to getting agencies on. So we had a slower sign-up rate than we thought, so we still have licenses left. Therefore, that's why I think we can defer. I think we have a whole nother calendar year where we probably can live within the budget we have from the county, which is why the trigger wouldn't be this year. What you would be paying for is helping to offset some of the licensing fees for the agencies who don't have the money to pay for that, because we want them to be in the system, to be able to enter data, and the IT person who is monitoring and running the project. So I think we have through December I think we have the money to get us through this calendar year without any problems covering our expenses.
All right. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I, this is absolutely the worst
Yeah.
part. So I'm
I
gonna.
hate this meeting.
I'm gonna put some numbers out there and you guys can tell me what you think. Transitional shelter for Woman Haven, $4,000. The emergency shelter, $6,000. Catholic Charities House of Hope, $6,000. Senior nutrition, $12,803, and $4,000 for the police athletic league. And that would be a deferral of the payment of the $32,000 if I did my math right.
If I may point out,
No, you can't point out after I already put out my numbers.
I think the reason why I bring it up is because we've had this issue in the past with PAL, unfortunately, where we haven't had, we've been after them for the expenditure of funds. And as I pointed out, that's very, very important. I mean, I know staff has worked really hard to try to get them to spend their money. And as minimal amount as it is, it does create issues for us. And
Then I'm
I mean, I have to make sure I mention that to you.
I noticed that you didn't have a slide for them, so I'm going to bump each of those other categories up by 1,000.
And Councilmember Walker, is that at the 32,000 threshold or the 27,000?
32.
I would only suggest that if we're not going to do the 4 for PAL,
Yes.
that we put the entire 4 on senior nutrition.
Okay, so then what we have is 466, 14,803.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just, I think we all recognize that that's a segment of our community that doesn't necessarily always get recognized, and with the senior meals program, I think it's just it's for a lot of those seniors, it's the only visit they get, and it's the only meal they get, so.
Did I not add that right? So 4,000, 6,000, 6,000.
32, yeah, that would be
Okay.
correct. So the motion or the suggestion at this point would be 4,000 for transitional shelter, 6,000 for the emergency shelter and women and children, 6,000 for the shelter and women for, or I'm sorry, for the House of Hope, 16,803 for the senior nutrition, and that would be it.
Okay, thank you.
Comments? Questions?
I'm grateful that it is going to probably the most basic needs, which is food and housing. So I am grateful for that, and I appreciate your recommendation, Ms. Walker, on that. And we're just kind of doing the best that we can under these conditions. So I do appreciate the nonprofits' patience.
Okay. And so you have direction on that, Marcella, or do we do?
Yes.
We don't do a motion or anything. That was
It's just direction.
So I'd like to thank the individuals that came and spoke. I know it's always tough to come and ask for money, but unfortunately a needed evil that needs to happen. So thank you very much for coming, and
We
I do need
to make,
direction on the other
we need
eligible.
direction for, on the housing.
And the other eligible,
yeah.
The only other one where there's a conflict, Marcella, is with regard to the housing activities?
yes, basically,
Funding.
as you can see, total proposed or requested is 165,800.
Yes.
In this slide, we, like I said, potentially included what a distribution would be. And again, it's based on the fact that we didn't get funded for any housing rehab funding.
So what is our number then?
Basically, the recommendation, as you see on the slide, is the remaining funding of 605,000 to distribute 130,000, which would basically cover city programs, which would be the housing rehab, 100,000, and then the lead and asbestos, and then offsite. So that would include that. And then the code enforcement program, that is a city-operated program, and of course, the aquatic center project.
The, how
So
many?
that would basically mean that the proposed grid does not get funded, correct?
I'm sorry, the what?
The grid, the
That's
alternative
correct.
to solar, yeah.
Did we expend all of our funds for lead and asbestos this past year?
We didn't because we had some housing funding available, so we didn't have a need to expend it. That's part of the 48,600. And we haven't ended the program. We hope that, maybe the money is available, but if there is a project that comes up, there potentially that amount could be reduced.
But it seems to me, Ms. Piedra, that this has been a couple of years in a row now that we haven't had any expenditures out of asbestos and lead, that they're we allocate the money, but we haven't had anything pop from those
That's correct.
categories.
And part of it has been either one, because we've been able to add it to the project, but in the event that we can't do that, then that's when we set aside these funds.
Would we, under certain circumstances, when we have a property that we're, help me, when we.
We would need, it would be required,
Yes, would that be a source of funds that we can, as a city, when we're going in and taking a property that needs to be dealt with?
Oh, from a code enforcement side?
Yes.
No, we couldn't, because this is strictly for housing rehabilitation
Oh.
services. We can't do the code enforcement.
Okay.
What I kind of like about the grid alternatives, well, a couple of things that are weighing in my mind. One is the fact that we haven't expended those two categories for some period of time, and the fact that they're coming down, it's a nonprofit and employing people. And I love the idea of sweat equity, where you're getting people out there to assist at no cost to help people with improvements to their home that they would not otherwise be able to afford on their own.
Is it?
So, I mean, my recommendation, or what I'm gonna put out there, is to perhaps use the asbestos and lead-based paint, that $20,000, to at least partially fund the grid alternatives request.
Okay.
Can you do something with $20,000?
Sure, that we can scale either way.
Comments? Anybody?
I don't know, I think,
Go ahead, yeah.
I like to follow staff's recommendation. I think there's value to the solar alternatives, but I think, you know, if we find some homes that need lead-based removal or asbestos removal, it's better to have those funds set aside for those kinds of, from my perspective, higher level of necessity than not to have that money available.
When was the last time we expended money from those categories?
Did we spend some last year, right, in testing? I think the issue is here, we could potentially use up in just one home the 10,000, because just the testing alone, it's about 3,000, 4,000, just the testing. If we have to do abatement, then, you know, that could be very, very pricey. And so last year we did do one for the lead base. And again, a lot of it depends on the age of the home. I believe it's if it was built, what, 1979, I believe? Then we would have to test it if we're doing the rehab. So it only gets triggered depending on the age of the housing stock.
Marcel, are we required to spend a fixed percentage on housing activities?
Well, it's our first priority, but we haven't, I mean, that's why we go through this process. We're not, I mean, it's, in terms of our priorities when it comes to the consolidated plan for CDBG, it is, housing is the #1 priority. However, that's why we go through the RFP process to see, okay, what are the community needs? And so we go through this process, and that's kind of what also drives how we allocate.
As I recall, the year before I was elected to the council, the council at the time chose to set aside all funding for a major community project. Wasn't that the case?
The sports pavilion.
Was it the sports pavilion? And so some of this money, if it's not spent, it could be redirected to the
to other
aquatic center?
projects. That's
including the aquatic center?
Yes, basically that's the slide of, and part of the monies too, here, for example, CDBG, and it's not all coming from housing. There is also some funding that we don't anticipate expending with code enforcement. And as a matter of fact, they have reduced their proposal too, because, you know, we have in the past, I believe 3 years, left some money behind. So it's not just strictly, and like I said, we haven't really ended the program year. We just kind of are anticipating that we may have this money available. I mean, if we come across a project where we do expend it, then we expend it. We're just kind of projecting it out.
So to clarify, if at the end of the program year, we haven't expended any of the money for the lead base or the asbestos, we can redirect that
Yes.
money to
Whatever,
the aquatic center.
or whatever other project you would like to see. That's eligible.
Always going to be the aquatic center right now.
Probably.
Everything's going to the aquatic center. Interesting, okay.
And what's really interesting, I mean, if you really were looking at it, you could potentially say, okay, we want the full 600,000 to go to the aquatic center project. I mean, obviously, we're making the recommendation for housing because if we would have received that grant, believe me, you probably wouldn't see that request. But unfortunately, because we didn't get funded, that's why at least we're the very, very minimum. I mean, if we were to get a big project, it would just take up just one project.
The one project, one house.
But like I said, I mean, if you were looking at it, if you didn't want to fund code enforcement or any of the housing, you could potentially set aside the full 600,000 for the aquatic center project, if that was the pleasure of the council.
Might need you next year. Well, Mr. Cardenas, you had something?
You know, I like, I'm sorry, sir, what was the name of the organization?
Grid.
What is it?
Grid.
Grid. And unfortunately, I mean, I do like it. I would like to see maybe some seed money go towards that project. I'm just unfamiliar. I wish, you know, there was some resident testimony behind it or something that would make me feel a little bit more comfortable in allocating. I mean, it would have been very, very helpful. But I'm not opposed to maybe considering some seed money where, you know, we can come back and get a better idea of what that value is. I know I appreciate Councilmember Silva's inquiries and comments regarding the value, but that's just kind of the area that I'm struggling with, and maybe reallocating some of those monies. I would just really love to hear some more residential testimonies in regard to the impact that has. But again, I'm not opposed to any type of seed money going to that project, and that's just my personal opinion.
Marcelo, what's the testing cost for asbestos? Is there a fee for that?
Yes, again, I mean, it could range, I mean, depending on the extent of the asbestos or lead. I mean, one project could take up that full 10,000, just one project alone, if that was to come positive.
I was wondering a compromise maybe as reducing both the lead base and the asbestos to 5,000 and putting forth 10,000 towards the grid alternatives to allow them to move a couple projects and then come back with some results, kind of like what Mr. Cardenas is talking about, and see what kind of benefits we get to the community off of that. How do you feel about that?
I'm good with that.
I back that.
You guys okay with that? Sheila?
How much are we talking about?
We cut it in half, so 5 and 5, and then put 10,000 towards grid alternatives. And allow for, at least if we had some testing issues, we could at least fund the testing. If we had a major issue, we may have to look for money from someplace else if we want to move that direction, but.
We can do 5,000, I mean, if everybody else is taking a cut, we can do that. We could do 5,000 for
feel
lead
like-
and asbestos.
5, and a 10.
Everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay. Frank? Frank's like, no. You want to donate some of your code enforcement money?
Go ahead, please.
No, it's actually, regardless of the age of the building, if there's going to be any type of renovations, demolition, it has to be tested for asbestos and lead. It's not based if it was built before 1978. It's any demolition period has to be tested for asbestos. Just an observation.
All right.
Okay.
It's expensive,
So
right?
do I. Okay, all right, so I think staff, you have direction?
Okay, so just for clarification, for lead, we're doing 5,000, asbestos 5, offsites 10, and then 10,000 for the grid project?
Correct.
And then, yes?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And then, I'm assuming you're okay with 100,000 with housing rehab and
Yes.
69,000 code enforcement and 400,000 going into aquatic center? Okay,
Correct.
perfect. Thank you.
I think, I'm sorry, what was your name? Paul. I think it would be very beneficial to come maybe in 6 months with some stats and some success stories, maybe even, as Mr. Cardenas said, maybe some testimony from one of the recipients of your program. Okay?
If I may, we have, happy to collaborate with city agencies on this sort of thing. Often, a house that needs to be rehabbed, for instance, could also be a good candidate for solar. So happy to collaborate with the city agencies and other groups on this. And we'll definitely come back. I appreciate the vote of confidence, and we'll come back with some more hard data and stories and educate you some more. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Oh. Yeah. All right.
We could do solar as a hope and reduce their operating expenses.
There you go. That'd be awesome. Okay. We didn't have any, do we have an added item? We didn't have an added item. That's true. Okay. We had an informational item. Was Mr. Hagan, was he going to talk on? I don't think so. He's not here. Were you going to talk on the El Nino preparations? Do you want to just give a very, very quick report? Okay, because I know that some of the council members had asked for that. So we can move to that item, actually. Item number 11. Go ahead, Abraham.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. Well, El Nino document that's presented in the information item before you is step out of a request from council. It's a great idea to have a document for citizens to go and get some information. Our director, Sherry Hagan, went and found some templates, and public works staff went ahead and modified it to city and made it available via Facebook and our city account. And it's also available on our city website. We are working on a Spanish translation to that, which will be as well loaded to the website and loaded to Facebook and our social media. And that should be available within the next week.
I
Any
think
questions?
staff did an excellent job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very timely, great, great, great.
Appreciate
Thank you,
getting
sir.
that out to us. Thank you very much. Okay, time for public comments. Anybody from the public wishing to address the body? No, okay. You were leaning forward in anticipation or something, so I thought. Okay, seeing none, we'll do task force reports, and we'll combine them with our council and reports also. Ms. Garcia, do you have anything? No. Okay. Walker?
Let's see, we did have a Community Enhancement Task Force on January 20th, and did it live up to your expectations?
Absolutely. It's very good.
It was really, really great. You'll have the minutes of that Community Enhancement Task Force meeting shortly. I think a couple of highlights that we'd probably want to talk about, the Dogwood Avenue entrance fence. It's moving along, I hope. That looked really, really great. The update on an inventory for our bus stops. You're going to see some improvements with the bus shelters. And the city streetlight policy, we're looking at a citywide program there. So that was on the 20th. On the 25th, I think I shared with you that I was invited to testify at an Assembly State Legislative hearing on transportation. That's chaired by Assemblymember Jim Frazier. So I testified with regard to the Sustainable Freight Action Plan effort. So that was kind of highlight that day. That was on the 26th. On the 27th, SCAG was down, Southern California Association of Governments, did a briefing for elected officials on the RTP SCS. I happen to have some extra copies of the executive summary, as well as there's a specific one for Imperial County. That was on the 27th. Oh, I forgot. 26th, and maybe Mr. Silva will add to this, was the El Centro Regional Medical Center Board meeting. We had the UCSD representatives with us there, so it made for a very productive meeting. There are plans for a strategic planning session that are in the works, which will be really great. The MOU with Calexico, with the Heffernan District, lots of positive reports as to that, for that. And then we already mentioned the ribbon cutting for Rady's Children on the 25th. So we did the SCAG thing. 27th was also the ICTC meeting. There are 3 items I wanted to highlight in Mr. Baza's report. One is the unmet transit needs hearing is scheduled for February 11th. That'll be in Brawley. The Regional Safe Routes to School Master Plan is also available for comment if you'd like to take a look at that. And the last thing for Mr. Baza, the California Road Use Charge Pilot. Remember, the California State Legislature is looking to move away from the vehicle license, or the vehicle gas tax, and looking at vehicle miles traveled. So they have this pilot program. They're looking for people to sign up to be part of that. Also wanted to mention that there's a Regional Transportation Safety Summit that's sponsored by the California Department of Transportation. There'll be a hearing in Los Angeles. I don't know if we have staff people that would be interested in going. Regional Transportation Safety Summit, there's one in Los Angeles on the 24th of February, and then the 25th in San Diego. So Abraham, maybe I'll get with you later on that. And then I'm sure you folks have seen the updates on Interstate 8 and all of the delays that we can expect as a result of that. And then also at the ICTC meeting, I was appointed as the county's representative to the California Council of Governments, which is a statewide planning and program agency that focuses on issues of transportation, housing, the economy, energy, and the environment. The LTA meeting, this was kind of interesting. You know, the extension of that intersection at Austin Road and Brewer, where they have, you come out of the development and you hit that concrete structure
the bridge.
to keep you, keep you from going south. So
south,
what people are doing is, people who are southbound
According
make
to
a
you.
U-turn, and so what what they were proposing at the LTA meeting was simply extending that concrete island. And we said, we think that's a bad idea. And so we kicked it back, and they're going to go back to IID and see if maybe IID would be willing to kick in a little bit more money. Because here's the configuration right now. They need more right-of-way so that they can have an additional lane there. So we'll see what happens with that. Okay. Oh, I think most of us were at the League of California Cities event. That was really well attended. I was surprised they were able to get all of us into the courtroom. It was pretty crazy. And at that meeting, I was elected to fill, I can't fill Sedelia's seat. I can come after her to serve on the League of California Cities Board of Directors. So I'm looking forward to that. Journeyed outside city limits to Hopeville for their annual dinner on the 29th, and then the rib cook-off the following day. And then earlier this week, on the 1st, that was yesterday, I serve on the Juvenile Justice Commission, and I think that there is a lot of interest in partnering with us on the graffiti issues, but we have to be able to document that there is, in fact, this concern that juveniles are being arrested and then just kicked loose, because one of the people present, one of the judges actually contends that that's a public perception but not a reality. So we need to get some numbers behind that. And, yeah, we need to talk to PD.
Specifically about that issue.
And do they say it's a problem?
Absolutely.
Okay, then I'll whisper in your ear who gave me that information. And then tomorrow I'll be traveling to Los Angeles for the Southern California Association of Governments meeting. First thing out of the gate Thursday morning is we're going to have a meeting with the California High-Speed Rail Authority. Both the chair of the California High-Speed Rail Authority as well as their chief executive officer are going to be at SCAG to talk to the executive administrative committee, because if you've read in the paper recently, what they're now proposing for the high-speed rail is, instead of a southern section, which would benefit Southern California, they're now looking to swap it to Northern California, and we don't think that that's the way they should be going. So we'll be talking with them, and I'll update you at the next meeting.
Yeah, just to piggyback a little bit on Ms. Walker's comments regarding graffiti, we did have kind of an ad hoc public safety meeting to kind of address the graffiti issues. I know our mayor was there as well, and so we were able to get the police chief, our commander, chief of probation, and both Judge Uo and Judge Kwan in there, and to kind of come up with an idea. And so there's some plans in the mix that's gonna kind of be addressing the graffiti. I know a statistic that they did throw out there in regards to some of the graffiti is that 90% of it's related to juveniles.
Yeah.
So, so having all those folks in there kind of was a myth buster in terms of, well, who's pointing fingers and what's really happening. So I'm actually excited because in the next 30 days, the chief of probation is going to report back with the plan and on how we can maybe address that. So there'll be some more information. Our mayor was also a part of that. I also participated in the library feasibility study. I want to thank Marcella for putting that together. We had a great attendance, diverse group of folks. We discussed things like literacy, location, future library services. So very, very pleased to you putting that together and the provider as far as addressing that. So excited about seeing our city library services move forward. And the last thing I attended was on January 29th. I attended have been practicing on this word all day and I can't pronounce it. It's a columbarium. Have you ever heard of that word? So at the is where they store urns. So, and it's a tribute. It's really neat because at Evergreen Cemetery, it's a what is it, columbarium?
I know what you're talking about.
Well,
For the veterans?
yeah,
family?
it is. This is the most beautiful tribute that I believe we have in terms of our memorial for our armed services at Evergreen Cemetery. And if you guys get a chance, take a look at it. It's really a class act. Chuck Jernigan and his board of trustees out there did an excellent job. I know Duggan's Construction was a part of it, but this thing is beautiful, and it was quite an event, and it just really shows a tribute to our armed servicemen who have, were in our armed services. But if you get a chance, take a look at it, and it was a really nice ceremony. So that's all I have.
And Ms. Walker
I'm
forgot.
sorry, I forgot, and I typically try to let the city clerk know when I'm going to be out of town. So Saturday, I'm leaving to go to Washington DC for the National Conference of Regions. And then we'll also have a congressional briefing, so I'll be gone Saturday through coming back on Wednesday.
And I just want to add too, I will be absent at our next council meeting on February 16th.
All right, Mr. Silva.
I attended the coronation for our Mardi Gras King and Queen, Mr. and Mrs. Sanders, and I have to say, Marcela, that the community center looked amazing. It was just so beautifully decorated, and all the details that were put into that. It was just an amazing event, very well put together by the city, and I was very happy for Sedalia and her presentation. I think she's getting a lot of very well-deserved recognition. She's really someone very special in our city. I also attended the league dinner, and that was very good. That was my last meeting as the league president, and that was very enjoyable to do. I also was a judge at the Migrant Debate and Speech Contest last Saturday. That's put together by the Migrant Department over at the County Office of Education. This Monday, I will be attending the Medical Marijuana Regulation Safety Act update by the League of Cities in San Diego. And I just want to add another thing on the hospital that Mrs. Walker reported. As you know, the hospital has had an interim CEO for quite some time now, Mr. Virgen, and I think he's done a very good job for the hospital, but the hospital board feels that it's time to begin to search for a permanent CEO position, and so we are talking, and at the next board meeting, we're probably going to get some recommendations on a search firm that would initiate the process of selecting our new hospital CEO, or potentially Mr. Virgen is encouraged to apply for the position, but it will be a wide search to get someone here that will help us move the hospital, continue to move forward for the benefit of our citizens. So, we've heard that the timing for that may be 3, 4, or 5 months. So hopefully, about 6 months from now, we'll know who our permanent CEO will be for the hospital.
Mr. Mayor, if I can jump in, I forgot to mention that I was honored to attend the League of California Cities Academy for new council members and new mayors. That's why I was not present at the last council meeting, but that was in Sacramento, and we did have a good opportunity to get around and meet other council members and mayors from all over California, and it's amazing how much the issues that are resonating all over the state are affecting us here and all over California. And we did also have an opportunity to meet and go into the office of Senator Benueso and Assemblyman Eduardo Garcia. They were very gracious in offering their time and company and discussing the issues that are affecting their district and our town. So that was a great opportunity, and it was a
Time
very
well spent.
Yes, time well spent, exactly.
Yeah, they always put on a good event there. Okay, so it's been a busy last couple of weeks. So I completed my year as chairman of LAFCO on the same day that you completed your year as our division chair, and our new chairman is Supervisor Mike Kelly. So he took over there. Attended the library assessment stakeholders meeting with Mr. Cardenas, and I concur. It was a great turnout. It's too bad we don't always have that kind of a turnout, but it was a very lively discussion, and so not only did we have a good turnout, but we actually had discussions, so that was good. Also attended the chamber mixer where we had Sedalia and Albert crowned. Took the opportunity to have the tour of the Carlsbad desal plant. What an amazing facility. That is if you ever get an opportunity, I think they're going to do another one later on this year. Maybe some of the other council members can go. Incredible facility. And I mean, they process 600 million gallons a day. And
produce 1 gallon of drinking water.
Yeah, exactly.
At a cost of
And
$400,000.
at the end, you get 1 bottle. No, but it's kind of cool because they take you through the entire process, and then at the end, you actually get to drink water that's gone through the process. But the funny thing is the water is so clean that they actually inject minerals and stuff back into it. Otherwise, it would be, it's too pure.
taste odd.
Yeah, it would taste weird because it's too pure. But it is the largest facility in North America. Not in the world, they have a lot in Israel and Saudi Arabia and places like that, but it's the only operational one in California. A smaller version up, I think in, what do you say, Huntington Beach or Long Beach area that they're trying to bring back online. But anyways, a very, very cool tour. Had the Pro Valley Youth Fishing Derby out at Sunbeam Lake. Had about 350 Valley kids out there. Was asked to judge the chili cook-off at Christ Community Church, and there was food involved, so I went. Also attended the graffiti discussion that Mr. Cardenas set up, and I thought it was a very fruitful discussion. Hopefully some good things will come from it. El Centro Elks Club turned 100.
Wow.
Which is, I think, pretty commendable. So I presented them with a proclamation for the month of January, and it's hard to believe that a service club in our area is 100 years old.
100 years old,
You know,
that's
so
cool.
that's pretty cool. I also went to the league dinner, and this morning, actually, was it this morning or yesterday morning? Yesterday morning, it's all mixing together. Catholic Schools Week, so I presented them with a proclamation over at St. Mary's, and we also had the Aquatic Center update because I took Sedelia's place on the task force, so they gave me a good update. Also, one thing that I'm going to be bringing forth next council meeting is an initiative to have a Veterans Memorial Park and parade that ties together with Veterans Day in the city of El Centro, and I would like to put together an ad hoc or task force for that, and so if you guys are, anybody's interested in joining me on that? We could. You want to do that? Okay. We might leave it under community enhancement.
That's where we talked about it last.
Okay, then we will leave it under community enhancement, and but just for the other council members that weren't part of that, we have the parcel over at. Is our time up? Is that why lights came on?
You're giving us.
It's like we need to put more coins in the box, or what?
You see the maintenance people already
Yeah,
back?
exactly.
Okay, that's hilarious. Computers are off,
Yeah.
let's go home.
Somebody drop another quarter in.
Funny.
Anyway, so the parcel that's next to the south of the fire station 3 that is designated as a park area is the piece of property that we're looking at, and I'm going to get engaged with some of the labor unions and trying to. I have a very ambitious goal to have a fully constructed Veterans Park in time for Veterans Day this year, and to have a big parade that actually ends at the park. So it is ambitious, and Marcella's getting grayer hair every day when I talk to her about it. But we're gonna try to make it happen.
Maybe we can end at the Aquatic Center.
I haven't built that yet. So with that, I have nothing further. Anybody else have anything? Okay, we are adjourned. Good meeting.
Judge?